take chances, make mistakes, get messy. Like, that's the only way you learn, and allowing yourself the space to do that is the best way, I think, for you to kind of be happy with yourself.
All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the show. This is the What You Don't Hear podcast. This is a life podcast, it's a story podcast, it's a bit of an open journal dive into people's lives as I sit and I uncover the real story behind my guest journey, finding out what makes them who they are and digging into the parts of their story that we otherwise wouldn't get to hear. Now, I am your host. My name is Ross Tyson. I'm a freelancer of all kinds. I'm a creative director. I've been known to dabble as a filmmaker. I'm quietly trying to build a media empire. But of course, as you can tell in this case, I'm a podcaster because I'm somebody who, just really enjoys talking to people, probably a little too much. But thankfully for me, I can do things like this, where I sit and I talk to people about their lives and their goals and their fears and their dreams and accomplishments and everything in between. So I'll tell you about my guest this week, but first, of course, I have some very lovely sponsors to tell you about because, well, if I didn't, that would be kind of rude of me because that's not how sponsorship deals work. So first, this episode is brought to you in part by Makers Social, a place that is located right here in the Franklinton Arts District where I happen to make this podcast. It is legitimately right across the street from my studio. So what is it? Well, Maker Social is a DIY project bar where you can get your hands messy with some fun projects with things like woodworking, leatherworking, jewelry making, and painting. And they also host private group events such as team building, corporate events, and birthdays. Now, what's more interesting is, well, you can drink while you do the things if you want, because they also have a full bar loaded with cocktails, local beers, and a very rare bourbon list for you bourbon collectors out there. So, honestly, what's more fun than getting your craft on with some friends while also maybe getting your drink on as well for a night out? So, right now, you can make a reservation on their website, and if you do, you can use the code WYDH, type it into the notes section of your checkout when you make the reservation to get $10 off your project's booking. So, head over to makerscolumbus.com if you want to go check it out. Oh, excuse me. Hopping in here real quick to tell you about a brand new sponsor for the show, Ope Cold Brew. It's cold brew that uses naturally processed ingredients with no preservatives or additives and roasted right here in Columbus. And guess what? You can get Ope delivered right to your door every Friday if you live in Columbus. Or you can do weekly or bi-weekly subscriptions, and if you do subscribe, you save 10%. Otherwise, they have 4 packs available for $20. So if you want to find out more, follow them at Ope Cold Brew or visit opecoldbrew.com to grab a 4-pack or set up your subscription. Ope, it's dang good cold brew. Now, this episode is also brought to you in part by PromoWest Productions. And you know the drill by now. I've got some cool shows that you can go and check out. So if you're interested in catching one of these live events, you can find the following concerts happening at Kemba Live. They've got Mark Rebellion on October 9th, AWOL Nation on Friday, October 14th, Gogo Bordello on Friday, October 21st, and Highly Suspect on October 26th. A couple difficult names to pronounce there in this set of ad rolls. I hope I said those correctly, but you can check them all out going down at Kemba Live. So if you want to grab tickets, visit axs.com. Or, as always, for more info on these shows or any other ones that are upcoming, you can find all the info you need at promowestlive.com. All right, so in this episode, I sit down with Matt Teegarden. Matt is the host of Tasting Columbus, the web series by 614 Magazine, which is where I found him, and really all I knew about him until this conversation. And of course, in the theme of this show, there was so much more to get to know about Matt, and you know how he got involved in hosting a show, where his interest in food even started. And guess what? Spoilers, folks. Dude's a food scientist. I didn't even really know that was a thing to be, if I'm being honest with you. And also, of course, if you weren't aware, well, you're in luck because you can learn all about it right here in this conversation along with me in real time. So let's dig in. That's a food pun in case you missed it. So here it is, episode 68 of What You Don't Hear with my guest, Matt Teegarden. All right. Well, dude, everything is up and running. The red lights are all
I see
on.
'em.
Are you ready to make a podcast?
Let's do it.
Let's make this happen. Matt, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Dude, thank you so much for being down. We're meeting for the very first time, so
Yes.
I very much appreciate that you were like, hey, you know what? We've never talked before in real life. Let's make a podcast out of it. I have said it many times on this show. This has become my cheat code to making friends.
We'll see if we're friends after this.
We'll see. And we're going to see if the cheat code works. We'll see when we get to the end of this and be like, hey, you know what? We're not friends, but thanks for the podcast experience.
Good luck. Yeah.
That was a fun conversation. So you work for 614 Magazine, correct?
Sort of on the side, actually.
Sort of on the side.
Yeah.
Okay. So how I found you was Tasting Columbus.
Yes.
So, which I am jealous of you for hosting that for multiple reasons, right? One is the obvious, like, at Tasting Columbus, you get to go around and check out cool local restaurants and all this sort of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And eat tons of great food, I assume, right? And
Dream job right there.
Right,
Yeah,
right. And
absolutely.
meet a lot of cool people. The other half is just me individually. I love the idea of hosting a show like that. So seeing somebody that gets to do that, I'm like, oh man, that's so cool. And especially something that's local to
Yeah.
Columbus. Like, because it almost seems even more obtainable and almost more, not that like larger shows are less meaningful, but it seems
Right.
like there is more meaning to it of like, hey, we're shedding light on these local businesses around Columbus, right?
Exactly. I mean, like, that's the thing is, people say Columbus has a great food scene, and like if it's a big show, it's only going to come here, touch a couple places. But this is a show focused on Columbus, kind of like for the people of Columbus. And I've had people from out of town actually like talk to me and be like, "Hey, we went to this place because we saw it on your show." And like that also is like really fun for me because it means that I'm sort of bringing business and interest into Columbus.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Like, and so yeah, I love the idea of seeing somebody host a show like that because like I feel like that I think about things like that a lot. Like I wanted to do like a coffee series. Like, are you familiar with the Netflix show Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee? Right.
Yes.
So I was like, why couldn't I do my own version of that? And what I wanted to do is essentially just like an extension of this podcast, but
Yeah.
like find people around Columbus, but we go to local coffee shops
That would be fun.
and try the coffee, much like you would probably like try the
Yeah.
food and all that sort of stuff. But I'm having the conversation just like the Comedians in Cars thing
Yeah.
in the coffee shop. And like the through line would be that I'm actually not a coffee drinker. So the
What?
goal would be, I know, surprising, right? After everything we talked about before we were rolling, I'm like, yeah, I freelance and do 97
I know,
things.
what?
Not a coffee drinker. But so the through line would almost be like me trying to find coffee that I like through all of these different like local shops and everything. So I say all that to say, my brain always goes to things like that, right? Where it's like,
Yes.
it's not this unattainable big thing, but it's just enough of an idea that's like, okay, there's some work that needs to be put into that. So when I see something like you being part of a show like Tasting Columbus, that is just so cool to me. And I'm just like, man, like getting to host something like that. Now, I want to dive more into how that even happened.
Sure.
But first, what else do you do? Because again, I'm only familiar with you via Tasting Columbus.
Right.
So what all are you up to? What all are you involved with?
So really my whole life kind of revolves around food. So by day, I'm a food scientist, and on the side, I host Tasting Columbus. So my day job, I work at OSU, totally representing myself here, but like I work as a food scientist there. And so really what I like about Tasting Columbus is that it sort of takes me out of like the whole like analyzing food from a scientific perspective into like appreciating it from a more cultural point of view and things like that. So I get to exercise sort of both halves of why I love food so much. Like I
Yeah.
love food.
That is awesome. Okay. Can you tell me what exactly is a food scientist? I'm sure you answer that question all the time, right?
I do, yeah. And it's one of those things that, so food science is an applied science. So, I would actually describe myself, I specialized in it all through grad school in food chemistry. But like when you let's say major in food science in undergrad, right? So you're kind of get a broad training across chemistry, microbiology, engineering, and you apply all those specializations to food, okay?
Okay.
So like for instance, the project that really roped me in was in my first food science class. My final project was ice cream, okay? Which like how can you not want to like study this further when
Ice cream is going to rope anyone in.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And so, it was kind of a simple project, but it was looking at changing the sweetener system in ice cream. So changing it from sugar to honey. I think we tried stevia, just changing the sweetener in ice cream. And it changes the flavor of the ice cream, but it also changes the chemistry of the ice cream. So it behaves differently, it melts differently, it feels differently in your mouth. And so what I love about food science is that you can really dig into like why these things happen with food and understand them at sort of a molecular level.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. That is food science.
Yeah.
That makes so much sense to me, but I don't think I've ever. I mean, you're the first food scientist I've ever met.
It's an honor.
Unless I've met somebody who's keeping it a secret for some reason, right?
You know what? It is kind of a secret. So it's actually agricultural discipline. So I grew up in the suburbs. I didn't know what 4-H was till I went to college, and so like going into college, like I would have never dreamed that I would study in the School of Agriculture and things like that. But that food science really drew me into that. And what you don't realize, I think, as sort of like going day to day, a food scientist touches like every piece of food that you eat, whether they were trained in food science or something else and found their way into like a food scientist role. Food scientists touch everything that you eat. And so it's a career where you can have a lot of impact, and it kind of flies under the radar.
Yeah. So what was it that like got you interested in food science in general? Like, because you say you grew up in the suburbs, all that sort of stuff. Like, what was it that you were like, hey, I want to dive into this? Like,
so maybe like 15-year-old Matt loved playing The Sims, and I promise this is going somewhere.
No, I love it. If it goes into Sims talk, this is fine.
Right? So loved playing The Sims, loved like designing the houses. I really started to love architecture, and so going into college, I was like, I have to be an architect. I took one architecture class and I was like, I am so bad at this. This is not what I thought it was. And then I kind of floundered around. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And so I kind of landed on, I want to go to medical school. But I wanted to sound interesting to medical schools when I apply. So I want to find like a non-traditional major. And so, some of my advisors at OSU recommended that I try different things. I started just taking sort of like the chemistry classes, and I was like, oh, you know what? I really love chemistry. I want to do something with chemistry too, and study that further. So I found my way to food science by, someone recommended I take this introductory class, fell in love with it, started doing research as an undergrad, stayed through my PhD, and never went to med school. But it's something that I kind of fell into and kept seeing the value of it, kept seeing that it fulfilled a lot of what I was looking for my career and my life. And it was hard to, turn away from it and do something else. So
right.
Now here I am, a food scientist.
And how long have you been doing it for?
So I finished my PhD in 2018, but grad school took 6 years.
Wow.
So, and was doing research even before that. So, I've probably since like 2010, so about 12 years.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So when does like the Tasting Columbus thing pop up? Like, how do you, half of me is asking this for the show and your story. The other half of me is like, hey, how do you get to end up hosting a show like that? I'm genuinely curious. Like, so how does that come about? Like,
well, so pandemic happened, right? And even I think right before the pandemic, I had always subscribed to like 614's daily email, and they put a casting call out in the email, and the pandemic hit, and I was like, hey, I'm like kind of bored. I have a lot of extra free time right now. And so I put in a video and, played the food scientist angle up a little bit. And it was kind of as simple as that. God called for like a screen test, and I thought I did terribly in it, but I guess I didn't. And I got the gig, and that's how it started. But my love for sort of communicating around food goes back before that, I would say. So as a student, I was very involved in a couple like food science communication groups. So one of them is Don't Eat the Pseudoscience, which, when me and a bunch of students went to a communication workshop put on by like our professional society, we all kind of banded together and made videos and things like that, sort of communicating different aspects of food science. And so that is where I really got to start practicing sort of the art of communication while being a scientist. And I saw 614 as a way to continue doing that, do something fun.
Yeah, I mean, and also like blend those together.
Yes.
Also, like blend kind of the two interests and like also flex that muscle of the communication thing. Like,
Yeah.
okay,
And it's been like a learning curve because on 614 they're like, throw out a food science fact, and like it has to be really quick, really brief, and in my mind it has to be like perfectly accurate because I have to represent myself as a food scientist. And so like it really, the thinking on my feet and like being quick while also still like being very accessible to someone who is not a scientist, that's been like a big learning curve for me, and I feel like I've been able to grow through that experience.
right. What was it like for you, like stepping into like a host duty? Because like over the years of doing stuff like this and also a lot of like the video directing work that I do, I because there's not a lot of options for people to cast in things and all that sort of stuff, I have ended up finding myself on in front of the camera probably just as much, if not more, than I am behind it. Right now, I have always had an interest in that, and I'd always have like had a love for hosting something or acting or whatever it may be. Right, so for me, I was like, oh yeah, absolutely, I'll dive into these roles, and I love it. And I also took an approach with it of, hey, I kind of know what I'm trying to, I know I need to be on when I'm in front of a camera, right? And I don't think a lot of people tend to think that way. No. What was that like for you? Like, did you go into it being like, heck yeah, I'm a food scientist, but I'm also ready to be this like rad host like I see on like the Travel Channel or something? Or was that a part of the learning curve where you were like, okay, I can talk about this stuff and I like this communications thing, but I need to like get a story out of this like restaurant owner and also be engaging to the camera at the same time? Like, what was it like for you stepping into those like host quote unquote shoes?
Have you ever felt just like so like a little out of place or anything, like you walk into a situation, you're like, what the hell am I doing here?
For sure.
Yeah, so that's how it felt the first time I was in front of the camera.
Okay.
Because what I didn't understand about this show, so the first sort of like I would say first couple months of the show were very highly produced. So like I didn't understand that there were going to be 2 camera people, a sound person, a field director, like a site director, and like things like that. And I was like, what are all these people doing here? I thought it was going to be me and one other person just talking to a camera. And so that was all overwhelming. And it also happened at like 5 a.m. because the first place we shot was a bakery.
Ooh, okay.
So like that was kind of rough.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so after that first episode, and like kind of like realizing that there's this whole behind the scenes part that happens with like a very highly produced show that's like really well done, I almost felt like I was in the background, and like I didn't understand, I think, really what it took to be a host. So yes, huge learning curve. Even now I'm like still trying to like really get into that, because I'm a pretty mild-mannered person. I keep things pretty even, but when you're on camera, you got to be on, you got to show the enthusiasm. And what's great is that it's all about food, which I'm incredibly enthusiastic about, so it's easy. But the other part that was really tough for me was like describing things when I eat them, right?
Yeah.
Like describing them to someone else so that they can understand through the screen how this might taste. So that was something that I had to practice on. I was meeting with one of the assistant directors, writing down descriptor words because I was repeating words too much and things like that. So I had to study for some of these things because I had to practice telling my friends what something tasted like and things like that. So it was a really steep learning curve for me, and I think I'm still on it. I think I'm getting better, but it's a challenge.
Yeah, I mean, any ones that I've watched, I think you're crushing it. So
thanks.
it's enjoyable to watch, and it is fun to watch, which again is another thing that I was like, man, this is so cool, because especially on a local level, right?
Yeah.
Something that's like, hey, this is specific to this city.
Yeah.
It's very easy for those things to toe the line between oh, this is a really dope thing, or oh, is this a high school project, or is this
right.
And that can come down to, of course, the production and all that sort of stuff. But it really will ride on the shoulders of the person in front of the camera. How does that
Yes.
person interact? Is it hey, thanks for having us at your restaurant. You got chicken nuggets for us today? Awesome.
Cool.
Great.
These taste good.
Cool. Eat them with ketchup, guys. See you later.
Yeah.
And it can very much be oh, okay, what are we doing this for? But uncovering that sort of hostability.
Yes.
And so it's when I stumbled upon it, I was like, oh, this is rad. And in the production stuff, that's always my, like, even though again it's a lot of the work that I do, I care
Right.
about that the least. I'm always way more on like, what's the story, what's the purpose here,
Yes.
and how are the people playing it out, right? Are we happy to be in front of camera? Are we working through a story? Are we communicating, right?
Right.
So that's always where I focus. And again, seeing Tasting Columbus, I was like, this is so dope. Like, so when you went like and were like researching or practicing this stuff, like did you like go and watch like Travel Channel shows and stuff to be like, okay, what do I need to do here? Like,
I was like, I turned into like the number one consumer of like all food related content very quickly. So like I'm at the gym on the treadmill, like watching Anthony Bourdain, I'm watching Guy Fieri. Like I was trying to just gather like all the inspiration I could, because especially for like a very type A person, it's like, unless I'm doing perfectly, I feel like I'm failing.
I feel you.
And so I had to just quickly sort of jump on that train and practice to my dog, like, having this very excited voice and, very loud, projecting, getting people to watch. And it was something that really, I didn't think it would have been so far outside of my comfort zone. Through the pandemic, I've learned I'm a little bit more of an introvert, but definitely have some of those extrovert personality traits. But yeah, it really pushed me outside of my comfort zone.
Yeah, I bet. I want to, because it's like you're also taking like the aspect of, hey, I know the science of food.
Yes.
And I know how to speak that language.
Yes.
But blending that with just casual language of, hey, let's talk about your restaurant a little bit. Let's talk about why you're choosing the food, blah, blah, blah. Because it's like, again, you have your base knowledge. You're like, oh, I could talk for 2 hours about this stuff.
Right.
But I also need to balance it out with like, okay, it's not necessarily even for me. It's a blend of for me, but also what does the audience, what are they going to want out of this, right? What are they going to need? Like,
Right.
So you also said that you kind of dove into a lot of those food shows. Were you a consumer of them before? Was it like, hey, my world is food, I love these sort of travel shows? Or was it like, I really dove in the deep end once I realized I was going to become one? Like,
that's the thing. So it's so surprising. So a lot of people assume that food scientists are like all about cooking and like they like live and breathe food, which for me, like that's mostly true, and a lot of my friends as well. But I also know food scientists that are like the worst cooks in the world, like don't know like, their way around a kitchen, things like that. So it's really interesting from that perspective that I had watched the shows, like I watched Top Chef and watched all of that, but I'm not watching for like the person that's hosting or the person reacting to food. I'm not paying attention to the mechanics behind that. Mm-hmm. And so like, I think probably you probably feel the same, like as someone that works in this type of space, like if you really look for that type of stuff, you'll notice it. But if you're just watching the show to consume it, like, pass through your brain, whatever, it hits differently. And so I found myself watching them very intensely rather than, passively on my phone, things like that.
Right.
So I definitely upped my consumption of it and changed the way I consumed it.
Which makes sense because it does turn into more of like an inspiration or study piece in a way where it's like, hey, I can still enjoy this.
Yeah.
But now I'm going to be noticing different things. But I'm also going to pick up different things where before I might have just been picking up like, oh, that food looks really good. And the way that this host is talking about it makes it sound great.
Right.
But now you're going to pick up like, oh, the tone in which they explained why the food tastes good is now what I'm paying the most attention to. Like,
right, and like what adjectives they use and things like that. I think, and even then, sometimes it's so off the cuff that you'll just be like, you'll say something, you'll describe a word or describe a food, and you're like, that's not really how, like, if I would have time to sit and think about this, I wouldn't necessarily describe it like that, but takes over, moving on. Like,
right, yeah. So what's the journey been like up until now with Tasting Columbus? Like what was the difference between like that first episode and then maybe the ones that followed that? Like, did you make a pretty quick change into like, okay, I know what I need to do to get comfortable now? Or was it like hey, we're in like, I don't know how many seasons that, there are or whatever it may be, but like, was it like, hey, it took me a while to now get to it? Or was it like, I leaned into it?
So I definitely leaned in. I had to lean into it, right?
Yeah.
Because I was like, well, I don't want to lose this gig. Like, I want to do this. This is really fun. I love it. And so I think by the second episode, I really started to like step into it. I could start recognizing things because, when you're in front of the camera and you can kind of self-critique a little bit, have that time and like ask questions and watch the footage later, of course, then you start to see things differently. And so I think that really helped me improve very quickly. What's been interesting though is that the people, so what's been interesting is that we have shifted this to more of like a short form now. So the initial episodes were probably close to like 20-25 minutes, go to 3 or 4 places, things like that. But now it's very much focused on like Instagram and TikTok, and so 2 minutes max, and I have to be a lot quicker. It's a lot more ad-libbing for me. So I started taking improv classes.
Love that.
Yeah, so I'm always trying to get better, because it seems like, especially with this, kind of figuring out the format that works best, the ball keeps shifting, right? So I have to sort of like also shift my own tactics and things like that. So I'm always learning.
Right. Do you feel like you miss the longer form stuff at all? I know that's a very deep dive question. I'm asking because like, and this is a whole other conversation for a whole other podcast probably, of like where social media is and the consumption of everything has to be so short and digestible. And for me, I think while I'm fine with that sort of stuff and I can play the game, I also hate the game.
I know.
And I don't like when things don't have a purpose. And it's just, how quickly can we shove this into someone's brain and then hope that it sticks, even though it's not going to stick because there was no purpose with it.
Right.
Again, that's a whole other rant, but like, what has that been like for you? And I'm asking because I know if I were involved in that, I'd be like, well, man, I don't like not getting to sit down with the owner of this restaurant and talk about the history of the place or why they did it and stuff, and then also talk about the food. Like, what's that balance been like in that transition? Like,
I think that, and the people at 614 have a pretty decent hand on like how to shift the content, and so like they're very talented, and I think have done a good job at keeping that balance.
Nice.
Which I'm very thankful for, because getting the stories of these different restaurant owners is so important to like why the show is important in the first place. Like, yeah, the food is like pretty much always going to be pretty good. But the story is really interesting, and why these places are so special is really interesting. And so we've been able to maintain that, I think. And so, for instance, when we shifted to a shorter form, now I'm just trying like one dish, their most popular dish or something like that. And I think that that's fine, because it gives you the flavor of what you're going to find there, and you can go discover for yourself all the great variety that they have.
Yeah.
But it's telling the story, and that gets you in the door there. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So how often are you guys filming? Like, is it like a normal, like, hey, we batch a bunch of episodes and then gradually release them? Or is it like hey, every month we're going out for 2 or 3, like?
The latter, yeah.
Okay,
So we're pretty much like, hey, let's go to this place this month, and we go there, we film it, and then maybe a couple weeks later we film another one. So it's sort of like here and there, and for me that's nice because I have a day job, right? So it helps me balance my time. But I think it also helps me see the episode and be like, okay, here's what I didn't like about myself, or here's what I did really well. So it helps me study myself to improve.
And almost make those changes quicker.
Like, do you like watching yourself on camera? I kind of hate it, actually.
I don't know. Like, I feel like I'm very in between. I can't say that like I always go back and rewatch everything that I do, whether it's like a short film or these things. A lot of the times I have to because I'm editing them.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So it's like, that's the joke about this show is like I have all these conversations twice. I have them once real time, and then again while I'm going through and editing, cutting back and forth between who's talking, all that sort of stuff. I feel like I've almost desensitized myself in a way to, especially like in something like this, I'll be very hard on myself if I feel like I said something stupid, right? I'll be like, and it's like an hour 15 into an episode, and I'm like, somebody's casually listening right now. So the fact that you stuttered over that word or asked a silly question, they're not going to pinpoint that out of the entire episode, right? So I've learned to kind of like reel myself in on those sort of things. And then with short films, I feel like I almost watch myself, this is going to sound probably too artsy, but like I feel like I've learned to watch myself, I'm the director watching the talent.
Yeah.
And while I'm going to be very harsh to myself of like, why did you do that facial expression? And then that's not what you should have done. Like, I will be picky on myself like that, but I'm also like, is this just getting the point of the narrative across?
Okay.
And if I can do that, and if that's like, hey, this is what was in my brain, this is close enough, right? Then I'm like, okay, good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I know that was a super long answer to a relatively simple question. But I feel like I found a pretty decent balance with it, where like I will definitely nitpick. I will definitely be like, oh my God, you look so stupid. Why did you do that? But at the same time, I'm like, at the same time, it's okay. Because it also goes back to like the consumption thing that we were kind of talking about earlier with social media is like, I know that my version of perfect is going to be up here.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Somebody else's is going to be way down here. And they're like, dude, that short that you did was awesome. And I'm like, yeah, it didn't turn out the way I wanted it to. I didn't really say the lines correctly. And they're like, could have fooled me. You know what I mean? Because they don't know. Right?
Right.
So is that sort of similar? Like, have you grown to kind of feel that way? Or are you like constantly like kind of berating yourself of like, oh no, why did you do this?
I'm a work in progress in that field, because it's even one of those things where even as a scientist, like after giving a scientific talk, I'll be like, man, I practiced this. I could have delivered that better. I could have done this better. And I do think that this has helped me in a way, like sort of be a little bit like give myself a little bit more room, because I mean, it's out there. It's not coming down. I got to live with it. And so it has helped me a little bit, I think, in that sense, and I hope to get to a healthy place for it.
Yeah, well, that's I think the thing that I just reminded myself of a lot is like it is that idea of like our individual version of perfect, our
Right.
bar that we're putting for ourselves is always going to be higher
Right.
than what somebody else is going to say. Well, Matt, you better be this good
Right.
at, you know, like, yes, certain jobs and stuff like that. Yes, there's an expectation, but even within that expectation, we're always going to be putting so much more pressure on ourselves of like,
Right.
okay, they want me here, I gotta be here.
Right.
And it's like, well, no, actually, you just need to be here. Like, it's like, this is totally usable here. And I mean, it took me, and again, I'm not by any means perfect with that feeling at all. There's a lot of things I consistently beat myself up for.
Right.
But I found a decent balance, you know, where even if
Yeah.
I am beating myself up, I'm like, you're just telling yourself that. Like you said, it's out there, it's over, it's fine.
Yep.
You know, like there's a episodes and episodes ago of this show, one of my friends interviewed me, so I shared my story for the first time on the show, and it ended up being like a 4-hour episode, right? And I was like, that was not my intention. I didn't want to make it like, oh, Ross's episode is the longest one. And when I listened back to it, I was like, man, why did you explain that way? Like, this is your chance of like your story, and you said
Right.
these stupid things, but no one else has said that.
Right.
You know what I mean? No one else has been like, bro, that was way too long. They're like, dude, I listened to that entire thing and I loved it for these reasons or blah, blah, blah. And I'm so glad you shared these things or whatever. And I'm like, oh, yeah, like the things that I'm going to be strict about for myself of like, why is it that long? That's stupid. Why did you tell those stories when you could have said this instead? You should have sounded smarter or more thoughtful, like whatever it was. It was
Right.
like, no, you were just being yourself in that moment. And that was like the best that you could deliver in that moment. And whatever that is, it's fine. Because no one else is really going to be sitting and thinking, most likely, oh man, that, you know, that thing that Ross did or that thing that Matt did
Right.
really sucks. Unless they just dislike you. And then also, technically, that means that their opinion is invalid for you anyway.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Because if it's somebody who just wants to be negative to you about like, oh, I remember in episode 4 of season 2 of Tasting Columbus, you said this thing stupidly. It's like,
I'd be like, you watch the show?
yeah, exactly, exactly. That is always, I'm like, hey, thanks for checking it out
Yeah,
anyway.
awesome.
Like, I
Yeah,
don't know,
thanks for
like,
the view.
did you turn it off then or did you finish the episode? Because
Right,
like,
yeah.
that's pretty cool either way. But it is that thing, and it's like, and if they do just want to be, you know, especially in the internet now, if they just want to hate and they just want to be angry about something, it's
Right.
like, oh wait, I don't need your opinion anyway.
Right.
Because you're not here to give valid criticism or constructive criticism or an idea, or you're not looking to feed into
Right.
the thing. You're looking to just take away from it, right? So it's
Right.
like, oh, well, that opinion doesn't actually matter anyway. Like, I remember one of the first few things I ever tried to use TikTok for, I posted a clip from one of the short films that a friend of mine and I did. And it's literally probably, to this day, my favorite thing that I've ever done. And in this little clip, like, you know, some random person on the internet comments, they're like, this was really the best take that you guys had. Like, this effing sucks. And at first I was like, oh my God, like, this hurts so bad. And then
They're
I was
right.
like, then I was like, I have no idea who this is.
Yeah.
And why do I care about what they, you know what I mean? Because like,
Right.
I'm stoked on this thing. And yes, that comment hurts.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it doesn't actually matter
And it's
at
like
all.
rude.
It's so strange.
Yeah.
Like, and because then it trickles down into, well, why is that person acting that way?
Right.
And again, is that a person that I even want to know
Right.
or value their opinion anyway? You know, it's like
it was Steven Spielberg.
Yes, and that's when I found out it was Steven Spielberg, and I did. That was very upsetting. That Steven Spielberg's opinion on my short film did end up hurting a lot. So I have stopped making films since then, and that was the last bit that I did. Yeah, in that case, I would be very hurt, and I'd be like, oh my god. But I'd also be like, how did Steven Spielberg find my thing? Like, how much of it did you watch, Mr. Spielberg? Like, could you give me a shot out of more than just this clip right here? Like, so yeah, but it's always going to be a constant battle. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, I think like, I'm around like 70 episodes right now of this show.
Right.
And I'm still, you know, when I'm going back and editing them, I'm like, why did you say that? Why didn't you ask this question that would have given a better, you know, like, you know what I mean? That would have set them up better, or that would have blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, it's fine. Like, it's fine. You're also 70 episodes in to a show, which is a feat in itself.
Right.
And also, my point in doing this, while yes, I am a perfectionist, it's not to make these perfect. It's just to make them real conversations, right? Like, you know what I mean? It's just like, hey, I'm connecting with somebody. I'm getting to know somebody. Sometimes, a lot of the times, for the very first time, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, we're just having this fun conversation, and wherever it goes is wherever it goes. It doesn't need to be some, like, perfect commercial of, like, give me the elevator pitch for Tasting Columbus, and I'm going to edit it in nice and perfect. And, like, it's like, nah, they're just conversations, so I don't have to beat myself up with that.
Right.
Like, so circling back around, what's been, you know, outside of, you know, judging yourself of, like, I'm trying to get better and all this sort of stuff, like, what's some of your favorite parts of being a part of Tasting Columbus been?
The eating.
Oh, absolutely, right? Yeah, that was a silly question, right?
Next question.
Yeah, that's exactly the answer.
No, you know what? It has been the eating, actually. So it's one of those things that a lot of the places that we've been, it's my first time going too. And so it's a lot of fun for me to have a genuine reaction to the food. And there's a lot of places that I've gone back to since then.
Yeah.
And like, they still recognize me and like say hey and like appreciate you coming out, that type of thing. And like that's really fun too. So I actually had some friends come up from Cincinnati a couple weekends ago with their kids, and like we went to a couple places that we had gone, and like the people recognized me there, and my friends were like, oh, this is so cool. And I'm like, it's not that big of a deal, but okay.
That is so cool. Yeah. That is very fun. Like
it's really fun. And it also, it's just like, again, supporting sort of those local businesses that are doing really cool things, making really good food, and I love that. That's the big thing, and you know, like the point of this show, but also like why I love stuff like that in general is like, I love when things that don't always necessarily get a light shed on them. Right. I love when the spotlight is put on them. Right.
I'm like, hey, let's talk about what makes this thing special, because while it might not have 1 million followers and it might not be going viral all the time for this one thing, and it might not be the most well-known thing ever, it still has value.
Right.
It still has an importance, and it still exists. Yeah. And that is in itself is important. And so again, like, I'm probably going to keep saying it this entire episode, like, but that's why, you know, I love the idea of something like Tasting Columbus, is because it's like, okay, we're going to these places and we're putting the spotlight on them.
Yeah.
And it's not just like, oh, hey, here's the one big thing that everybody knows about, and yeah, we're going to go to that and get cool cross promotion with that and the hype. And it's like, there's a place for that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's still cool to make genuine connections with something that might not always have that spotlight directed on it.
And that's so like, Columbus is such a special place. I feel like I really like living here. It's such a livable place. It has, you know, kind of this like, it almost feels like we have like no real like binding culture like some of the different cities in Ohio might have, but at the same time, we kind of do. Like, we're kind of scrappy. We have these like really like great independent businesses and things like that, and we have our own flavor. And so being able to experience a part of that on camera and help to tell people about it is what I really, one of the things that is the most rewarding about this whole experience.
Right. Now have you lived in Columbus like all your life? Did you just move here like?
So I grew up in Cincinnati,
okay.
Just north Montgomery, Sycamore High School for everyone in Cincinnati who has to ask, you know, what high school did you go to? So came up to Columbus for school and stayed for grad school, got a job after grad school, and never left.
So earlier, I'm gonna take us way back now.
Okay.
So earlier, you mentioned that you feel, you know, kind of like naturally introverted. but you can find when to be extroverted, right?
I would say that I always thought I was an extrovert, but what I am finding out through the pandemic is that I am actually probably an introvert, I
Yeah.
would say. And I mean, like, I don't think it's a binary. I think it's probably a spectrum.
Exactly.
Like most things in life.
Yes.
So I don't know. Maybe it was the pandemic that kind of caused this shift, but I feel like, I definitely need time to like recharge and things like that, which I didn't always give myself space to do before. And now that I do that, it's like, hey, it's okay to like sit at home, watch TV, and like you don't have to constantly be out doing something. It's kind of like, wow, this is nice.
Yep. I have learned to unlock that over the last handful of years, because
Yeah.
like it is 100% accurate to say that like I don't necessarily think that everyone is one or the other. I think you'll lean away, right?
Right.
But there's always going to be moments where it's like, oh, well, no, here's when the extrovert kind of raises up. And here's, okay,
Right.
yeah, the introvert is taking over. But I also think there's ways like resting or like, finding ways to be more social that can kind of feed both of those sides. That's at least what I figured out for me.
Yeah.
As I do feel like way more often, I do love just having some alone time at home where it's like,
nice.
oh man, I don't have to do anything. But I'm also such a kind of a workaholic in a lot of ways where I'm like, no,
Yep.
I do always want to be doing something. And sometimes I'll beat myself up if I don't do something. But I've also learned to value, like you were saying, those rest days and those relaxation days of just like, yeah, maybe I will just sit and I'm just going to binge this show and I'm going to let myself do it.
Or like even like, hey, I'm gonna stay in my house all weekend and work on house projects, and like
Yeah.
I don't need to talk to a single person, and like that's okay. And I think too, for me, what I'm realizing with some of these more introverted tendencies is that my thoughts are very internal. Like I don't necessarily like just speak my mind without thinking, whereas an extroverted person, a really extroverted person, would like be like stream of consciousness almost, right?
Right.
And so like I'm very intentional, very thoughtful about what I say, which is why something like Tasting Columbus or even doing improv will like take me out of that, because you don't really have time to think half the time, which is like really scary for someone like me who loves to like think about what I say before I say it.
Yeah.
And so that has been part of, again, sort of getting me out of my comfort zone, and it's been healthy, I think.
I think it's figuring out what those things are for you, because I think a lot of people, like, so me, for example, for years, when I would look at myself and be like, okay, I have a tendency to lean more as an introvert.
Yeah.
I would base that off of, okay, I don't like going to networking events and going and shaking 50 different people's hands. Obviously pre-pandemic.
I would say,
of course.
right? In this economy.
But I know friends who would talk to everybody in the room, right?
Yeah.
I just can't, I just don't like doing that. It's not because I'm scared to talk to people, but it's like, the thread of what I keep coming back to is like, I would rather have one or two meaningful conversations rather than 50 empty handshakes just so someone can forget my name in 5 minutes because they're
Right.
shaking someone else's hand right after
Right.
that, right? But I would always kind of beat myself up over that of like, why aren't you doing that? You're not extroverted enough. You're not feeding into the hype enough. But then I also realized, well, no, like, what is my version of being an extrovert? Well, my version of being an extrovert is doing things like this.
Yeah.
Because when I sit down with somebody, I can talk for hours and hours and hours and hours. But I like when there's an intention to the conversation. And that doesn't
Right.
mean an end result of like, at the end of this, we are working together great. But more so the intention of like, we both know we are here for the reason of getting to know each other or hanging out or whatever it may be. So like what I learned over the years was, and literally it felt like almost a hack for myself. Whenever I would start to feel down, low energy, tired, depressed, whatever it may be, and I'm like, oh man, I want to be so introverted. I just want to stay inside for weeks. I would actually make myself get out of my comfort zone, like you were mentioning. And even though I didn't feel like doing it in that moment, I would maybe a couple days or the next day or whatever, I would schedule a meeting with somebody. Hey, can we get lunch? Can we get coffee? Can we hang out? Whatever it is. And it would be with the intention of like, I want to go and I want to talk to this person. It's not so much, I'm going to a friend's house to play video games.
Right.
That can help, because that's, have fun.
Yeah.
But I would find that kind of blend of like, it's not quite business, but I'm not going to a friend's house to play video games. Can we just go get coffee and let's just catch up? Or, hey, can we meet for the first time, internet friend? Let's talk.
Right.
And what that would do is it would re-energize me. It would fill the tank back up.
Breaks the cycle. Yeah.
Exactly. So at the end of that, even though I was having a bad week and I'm just like, oh man, I don't want to do anything, it wasn't that I actually didn't want to talk to anybody. It was just that I wasn't in the right circumstances to do so, to feed myself the right energy.
Absolutely.
Does that make sense? Like,
It does. And I like really identify with that too, because it's one of those things where, you know, especially through the pandemic, like where we're very isolated, you start to feel a certain way and you're like, do I have like the worst depression ever? Like, I think it was natural for a lot of people to feel that way. And like, I think that having the ability, especially now, to go out, be a little bit social, see your friends, reconnect with people you haven't seen, it just like you said, fills the tank back up, and then you're like, oh, I feel great. You know, I'm gonna have a great day, and it helps you sort of get through those times where you are feeling a little bit more.
yeah, like for me, because like another thing that I picked up last year was getting a gym routine finally, right? Because I dove into like I'm a creative, I don't need to go to the gym, right? I did that for years, and I was like, no way, I really want to, right? So point being is like I started doing that, and obviously that's a physical pick me up, right?
Yeah.
That's like I've learned that there are a lot of days where I don't feel like going, and I get up out of bed and I'm like, the last thing I want to do is go to the gym.
Yep.
But then once I do, and I make myself go, and then I do a workout, I leave and I'm like, I'm so glad I did that. I feel way better. That almost in like a mental or emotional strength is what I feel like just scheduling a meeting with somebody does.
Right.
So like I learned how to almost work out both of those things of like, okay,
That's smart. Yeah.
I can see what the physical thing can do. And that's obvious, right? Yeah, you go to the gym, you're probably going to feel at least a little bit better, right?
Yeah.
You did something. But the mental and emotional side can kind of get cast aside sometimes where I was like, okay, I'm feeling great when I go and have a fun conversation with somebody.
Yes.
Again, not for business. We're not signing a contract at the end of it or anything. It's just like, oh, we talked for an hour, 2, 3, 4, like whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I'm leaving now being like, wow, first half of my day, I felt like this. Now having that connection with somebody, I'm leaving and walking away from that being like, wow, I feel amazing.
Yeah.
So it's like, I feel like there is sometimes a balance of like being able to focus on what is it that I need right now?
Yeah.
And what can I do to feed that, even if it might be something that I'm telling myself I don't want to do.
Right.
Like in the moment, at least.
Yeah. Yeah. I wish dating was like that.
Yeah, that's very fair. That's very fair.
Because dating feels like the opposite, but
Yeah. No, okay. Tell me in what way? Because I just experienced like that. Like that's a whole other thing. So like the last year of my life, I feel like relationship stuff really caught up to me.
Okay.
So for years I was like, I'm the workaholic. I don't care.
Yep.
I don't need a girlfriend. Like it's
Been
cool,
there.
right? So I was like, I don't need a partner. It's fine.
yeah.
And then eventually I was like, wait, this kind of sucks. I'm pretty alone.
Yeah.
And even though it was this weird thing where like simultaneously I feel like I was becoming very confident and comfortable with myself. Because I am a firm believer in the cliche line of like, in order to love someone else, you must first love yourself, right? At least a little bit.
Yeah.
I was finding myself hit that point where I'm like, you know what? I feel probably the best I have ever, right? Things like going to the gym, things like figuring out how to balance the introvert extrovert part, and just things creatively and all this sort of stuff. But as more that I got comfortable with that, it almost brought more things to the surface of like, okay, we're comfortable with this, but now wouldn't it be cool if we got this result because of that, right?
Yep.
So I honestly got in like a very, I don't know, kind of just a shitty place for a handful of months where it felt super defeating because I was doing all of these things that made me feel great.
Yeah.
But that one thing, and it's an argument of like whether that's good or bad to attach our, emotional well-being to like, oh, I don't have a partner, I don't have a whatever. Like,
oh yeah.
But everybody, like, that's our natural instinct, right? Is we
Yep.
want to be loved by somebody. We want to share with somebody.
Yep.
So anyway, like, it almost kind of like was this roller coaster. I was like all the way up at the top, and then I was like, this is amazing. And then boom, just like it all came crashing down. Where a handful of months, it was just like, this is terrible.
Yeah.
Just in recent months, that actually like ended up turning into a relationship.
Nice.
Which is something again that I was like, oh, well, I guess like it was the classic thing where like I felt super terrible about it. Then once I stopped caring and I was like, you know what? Nah, I'm getting back to me. It's fine. I don't need to worry about it. Then it popped up and it was like, oh, okay, here you go. Like, here's that thing you were wondering about. So I know I just ranted a whole bunch. What was your, like, what's your comparison of like you feel like dating is like different or like what, like the difficulties of it or?
So, and this might just be because I'm gay. Like,
Yeah.
Like I think dating is incredibly, like it's fun. Like I love getting to know people, but it's just I don't know. I find it really hard. One, the apps, like I can't, like Tinder and stuff like that, I can't connect with people just by texting.
Yeah.
I'm almost immediately like, if we've matched, like, let's just talk in person because I like am a bad texter and things like that, which, you know, I know some people don't really like, but that's just not my style. And so like, I don't know. It's just like, I find them so, like, I find dates like really draining almost, but I guess when they're good, it's really good, and they're not so draining.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where it's like, I don't know, like, because I'm the exact same way, where anytime I was on, like, trying to be on a dating app or anything, I couldn't even get past, like, the uploading photos, like,
oh, it's so
phase,
embarrassing.
because I'm
like,
just like,
answering
this is
the question prompts. I'm
yes,
just like,
I'm just like, oh, God.
And like reading other people's answers to them, it's like so cringy. It makes me so uncomfortable.
It is. Anytime I'm like, I'm sitting, I'm uploading photos. Like for a second, I'm like, yeah, let's just do this. And then like after like uploading 3 photos, I'm like, I'm sitting here worried about like whether I look hot in these photos.
Right.
This is not who I am. Like it's not. These are not things that I worry about day to day.
And
you know?
like swiping through like Tinder, like gay Tinder, it's like everyone has like their first picture is a gym selfie, and it's like, I go to the gym, I don't feel the need to like take a picture of it.
Right.
Like good for you. I find that actually really unattractive. But like everyone has that, I feel. So it's just like kind of finding like the like people that I find like I don't know. There's just like a lot of like looking through the weeds to like find the people that I feel like I could connect with, but it's also like the apps are just so superficial that I really hate trying to meet people that way because I start really realizing my own internal biases, and I'm like, wow, I'm a shitty person. And then like,
it's hard.
Yeah.
It's weird because like you're sitting and like it's a thing that is designed. You sit and you're like, you're not cool, or you're not attractive, or you're
right.
And like you're literally like, it's based off of like judge. And I know I'm probably making it deeper than what it actually is, but like that just feels weird. Now what's funny is the girl I am currently dating, we met on Tinder,
which is awesome.
But it's so weird because like when like her and I matched, she was like the only girl that I was like, yeah, this is like my type of girl. And then like nothing really came from it in that moment. But I did the same thing that you said where I was like, you know what? Let's actually like meet up. And I'm not saying this is like, oh my God, let's go on a date. Let's blah, blah, blah. Like, let's just see if we can be friends.
Yeah.
And then we did. And obviously, things, led down a road. But like, for me, it still was that like I honestly never thought I'd be sitting and saying like, oh yeah, I met a girl on Tinder and ended up dating her.
Yeah.
Because anytime I'm just like, oh God, this just like sucks. But then like once it got to the actual conversation phase, it was like, oh, okay, now we're figuring out we actually like, oh, you hate the app too? Weird, huh? Well, I guess good thing we were there at the same time because like I deleted it a week after. You know what I mean? Like I didn't want to do, but so it's like, it is this weird thing where it's like, I would be a hypocrite if I'm like, oh, don't use the apps, they're so dumb. With technically, like it worked, at least for right now, it worked for me, right? But at the same time, I still don't like what they are. I still don't like it. Like
I've met some really cool people through them, and like actually have some friendships that grew out of them. And like, it's fine. It didn't go to some sort of like romantic relationship because I still got to meet a cool person and like had a cool drink. Like found a couple new bars. That's great. But yeah, sometimes like when I get in the mode, like let's say I'm bored or something, and I'm like, oh, let me check out Tinder. It's like usually a lot of the same people, and I'm like, oh, I recognize you or whatever.
Yeah, right.
But it's a lot of like I find myself just like swiping people away at like lightning speed, and it starts to make me uncomfortable that I'm like making these like snap judgments based off of like one picture.
Yep.
When really what I care about is getting to know someone, and people are doing the same thing to me, and then like it's just like, oh, I hate this, and then I don't open it for like 3 months.
Exactly. The classic cycle, right? You're like, I'm gonna do it, and then you're like, oh God, and then I'll see you in 3 months.
Right.
Like, but that really is like, I would catch myself doing the exact same thing where I'm just like, blah 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 blah, and I'm like, this is gross. Yeah. Like, how am I able to make a judgment? And like, yes, I'm not going to sit and pretend like a lot of it's not based off of like, are you physically attracted to the person you're looking at? And, so it's like, yeah, we're not going to shy away from being like, oh yeah, if you're not physically attracted to somebody, that's probably going to be the first thing you're going to do. Like, oh, nope, they're not hot, whatever. So I get that's a lot of what's designed off of, but that makes me feel weird because even though if I'm not physically attracted to somebody, I'm still like swiping them away. And again, it's not this deep, but it makes me feel like I'm saying you're of no value to me. Like, and that's weird.
And
like
I hate
it is
it.
very weird.
I hate it.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I'll probably get on it tonight and like,
Of
just
course.
because we talked about it, I'm like, I wonder what's
Yeah,
going on.
like, I wonder if anything's changed.
Yeah,
Let's hop back on
Shock.
there.
Yeah.
And
It has not.
yeah, right. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
And yes, it's like that's always going to be a cycle. There's nothing. No one's really going to sit and be like, oh my god, you use Tinder. Like, I also know people who are like in the happiest of happy marriages.
Oh yeah.
Who met on Tinder or a dating app. So I'm like, okay, like it's
It
more
can
so.
work.
Yeah, it's more so just like the individual moral compass of how you feel, and because anybody can use Tinder for different reasons.
Yep.
Right. I mean, there's a whole documentary, The Tinder Swindler or whatever. Tinder Swindler. Yeah.
I don't know if I finished that one, but yeah, I started it.
You know what I mean? So it's like that person's just using it to change, or not change people's lives, ruin people's lives.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Well, that's changed too. In the worst way.
Exactly. Yeah. Negative change in the worst way. Yeah. It is very strange.
Yeah.
And it is like, and I think it's weird because I feel like a lot of people know that it's weird and strange, but kind of like almost social media in general, most people are just like, oh yeah, this is just what it is.
Yep.
I'm going to scroll through TikToks and watch 2 seconds of each of them.
Right.
And then my algorithm's going to tell me what I do and do not like, even though I haven't even actually determined what I do and do not like.
Right. Oh, it knows.
Yeah, apparently it knows. Mine recently, like literally the last couple of weeks, I have been getting the most random stuff.
Oh.
Like ads for lawnmowers. And I'm like, I haven't said one thing about mowing a lawn, nor do I mow a lawn. It's like, I have no idea why this is, but it's like, I don't know. It's very, very strange. And again, that's a whole other, algorithms are a whole other conversation of like, what is, like, is this good? Is it cool? Is it bad? Is it, because it's like, I feel like I'm stuck, and I can actively see that I'm trying to adapt, but begrudgingly adapting. And it's
what?
To like the new way of social media.
Oh, like the life of the algorithm on social media?
Because like we've talked about so much up to this point, like I'm the type of person who's like, I want genuine connection. I want real stories and real authentic, like I am the audience that whenever Tasting Columbus does put out, a full episode where you're digging into multiple things or one story, I'm that audience. I'm the one that's like, yes, let's learn about this thing. and that's not to say I don't, I ignore the shorter stuff, but like I'm that person. I'm the person who like, I want something to be more meaningful. So with that, it makes me feel like an old man yells at cloud, right? Like that's what it feels like I am. Is I'm like, I'm not going to sit and be like, oh, TikTok sucks or Reels suck or whatever. It's like, there's annoyances with them that I'm like, this is stupid. But also, my opinion on that does not matter, right?
Right.
Because I know I'm not the audience, really, that it's being geared towards,
Yeah.
which makes me worry a bit. Because I'm like, I like sitting and like, if I make a 10-minute short film about this like, dark thriller horror thing that's like psychological and whatever, and has this deeper meaning, it's probably going to get turned off in 5 seconds.
Yeah, it kind of hurts a little bit. Like you put a lot of work into that. You want people to watch it.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's what, and like, especially like podcasting and stuff, this show is very long. And so it's like, I know the audience I'm designing it for.
Right.
Right. But it also makes it in a weird way hard to promote because yes, I go through for social stuff and I cut out 15 seconds of, something really cool that you're going to say or whatever. And it's like, hey, I'm going to put this out, gives people a glimpse into what the episode's about. And obviously my hope is that hooks them in and they come in and they're like, oh, okay, let's get to know them for 2 hours, right?
Yeah.
And I know that's not always going to happen, but like, while I can sit and do the things that you need to do for social media, I'm fine with making little hype reels and stuff like that. I still am like, yeah, but like, this is not being made to get a bunch of likes and views as is. This is a teaser for something greater. Even if I pull 30 seconds from a short film that I made,
right,
I still want you to go watch the short film.
Right.
And I know that that's like, things like that I feel like are becoming a harder sell. Like, it maybe not. Do you feel like that's accurate? Because if you think it's inaccurate, I really want to hear it so you can make me feel better. So like, if you have a positive spin on it, please tell me.
I regret to inform you, I think it's very accurate.
Okay, all right.
But I'm exactly the opposite. Like I appreciate longer form things, but like Vine, do you remember Vine?
Oh,
like
yeah.
That was my jam.
Yeah.
I complete consumer of it, never really posted. even with TikTok, very much consumer. But like, I like a lot of the creativity that people show. Like, especially, I think Vine was actually like really creative. People got really creative with that. Like, there were some of the really funny videos that like stopped at the perfect scream moment or something like that. But
Right.
like, there's also people that were really creative with like what you could do in 6 or 7 seconds, right? And so like, I really liked it for that. But yeah, like, I don't know. I love TikTok.
Right. Yeah. But it's like, but I'm sure, at least from what I can gather from our conversation, I feel like you do, when necessary, you will dive into those.
But see, I would be the type of person that would see the teaser and like I'll watch a TikTok and then I'll be like, oh, that's interesting. Let me read the whole Wikipedia page on that. Like, I will then take the time to like exit the app, go look up the
You'll
thing.
take the deep dive. It's
Yeah.
not consume the 5 seconds, then scroll to the, which we all do. I'm not saying
Yeah.
I never do that, but yeah.
But I think like, so I'm the type of person that would see a teaser and be like, oh, I want to watch the rest of that or something like that. But I think that, I don't know, I think a lot of people are, they like the, quick look and they feel like they got the gist of it or whatever. But
Do
I
you
don't know.
do you feel like, I know we're talking real existential here.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that'll revert at all, or do you think it's just going to continue to be just like, yep, short form only? Because I mean, like, people still like binging things on Netflix is gigantic right now. So that
yeah.
shows that people are willing to put long amounts of time
Yes.
into something. Now, obviously, yes, Stranger Things is gigantic, so people are going to
Right.
be like, oh, Stranger Things, I absolutely am going to watch this, right?
Right.
But like, I feel like I can never tell the balance of like, okay, well, people still go watch movies after they see a trailer.
Right.
That's still there. People still will consume the long form content, but is it such a big battle of like, did your short form content entertain them fast enough
Right.
to hook them for the long thing? Like, I don't, and I know neither of us have the exact answers, but like,
I feel very unqualified to answer this, but what hooks me in is like that high production value. Like, I'm a total sucker for things that are like all the hype on social media and things like that. But like, it's sort of that, the flashiness of it will catch my eye, and like, that is what will bring me into it. And also if I can see that there's a strong storyline that I will be interested in.
yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. Like, I hope that more long form things come back, because the other interesting thing that I've noticed as I like binge TV shows is that it is in one ear and out the other. Like, ask me what happened on like the last season of Stranger Things. I have no idea. I just watched it, but like, I consumed it so fast that I had no time to like think about it between episodes, like, in the good old days when you had to wait a week to watch it or something like that.
Yeah.
And so like, things like that are like, I feel like, HBO will do that, right? So they'll drop an episode every week. And so I have time to actually think and kind of like, I feel like I remember it better. And so I think that this like long form binging, bringing people in, I think that, I don't know, I can see it kind of moving almost back to a model that gets people more excited about it for a longer period of time. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I hope that that's accurate.
Yeah.
Like, I do, because again, I'm being the Simpsons meme right now, right? But like, like, that is like, and again, it's not that I ever avoid scrolling, or I ever, I'll indulge for sure, but I usually will keep myself on track. I'm like, what else could I be doing right now, right?
The lady that comes up on TikTok that's like, hey, you've been scrolling for a while. I see her like multiple times before I go to bed.
Is that a thing?
Yeah.
Is that like a TikTok programmed thing,
Yeah.
or?
Yeah, it's like, hey, you've been scrolling for a while. Take a break. And I'm like, no, I have to watch
Wow.
another TikTok about hens laying eggs and like how many eggs this hen laid. And
I did not know that. So I'm not really a consumer of TikTok.
Okay.
I'm the one who, like, I have it. Honestly, TikTok to me is also like Tinder. It's the thing that like I'll go to every couple months where I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna go and use it, and then I'll post something and then I'm like, this I don't like this. And then otherwise, when someone like links me a TikTok, like, oh man, you got to see this. I'm like, okay, great.
Yeah.
Can't wait to watch this. Otherwise, I'm not a TikToker yet.
I think that I'm like also part of a friend group from college. We're all still like very good friends, and I would say we're very online. So like, I'm in a very aggressive Twitter chat with them. Aggressive from like the number of messages that are sent every day. It's died down a little bit as we've all like come to full-time jobs and things like that. But like it used to be like hundreds of tweets, just like sort of like sending them to each other every day. And so like that's how I got all my pop culture news and things like that. And then now we've like migrated the group to TikTok a little bit too. And so like I always have to watch, 50 videos every day, and then I'm scrolling on my own feed and stuff like that. So the peer pressure, man.
You know what's funny though is like I recently, so I don't know, do you ever use the the feed filter on Twitter where you can determine whether it shows your latest updates or if it just shows algorithm updates?
Yeah.
So like for a while, I was like, I just want to see what someone tweeted 5 minutes ago. Like I don't want to see the viral things. I just don't care, right? And then I actually was like, man, like, and I did that for probably a year and a half, I think. Because I really just I used to use Twitter all the time. Then I deleted my old Twitter because I was like, this is stupid. And then I was like, well, I'll just make a new one, just keep up with friends. And then now I'm just reverting back to like, I don't know, how can I enjoy it, right? But for like a year and a half, I had like the filtered feed where I was like, just show me what's going on right now.
Right.
And it was nice. But then I started to get bored with Twitter. And I was like, this isn't injecting me the way that I want it. So I switched back, and I'll be honest, again, even though I've went on this whole rant of like, I don't like consuming all this stuff, blah, 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 I've let myself feed into it. And it actually just made me enjoy Twitter more.
Yeah.
Because like now I'm seeing a bunch of more, like I'm seeing the updates that I want to see, but I'm also now getting a bunch of like, oh, look at this funny video, look at this crazy thing, look at this cool art thing, whatever.
Yeah.
And it actually did end up working to make me enjoy it better. But like it was a thing that I controlled though.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It made a conscious effort to be like, I want my feed to be filled with either trash and or art at all times. Like,
yeah. Oh yeah.
Bring it back. I'm ready. And it actually has made me enjoy, which I'm sure, the Twitter algorithms love. Is like, man, this guy's on here for like 2 extra hours a day now. We got him. Like, this is great.
The thing I love about Twitter is that it is just like this like weird dumpster fire of like the best and the worst people, and like they get to interact, and it's just like, I don't know, it's just so real to me.
It is wild. And of course, any comment section of anything is wild.
Yeah,
right?
but it's like you're in the comment like the whole app is the comment section, and it just feels like really underrated. I love Twitter.
I love a good tweet that's like, this app is free, and then it screenshots an insane conversation, and you're like, oh my god, I didn't have to pay to see this. This is insane.
I know.
Like, and that is the thing. Like, I will. There's a lot of posts where I will like knowingly click on the thread, and I'm like, I know what I'm looking for, and I know I'm going to find it. Because, it'll be like, look at this puppy playing with a ball. Isn't it amazing? And I'm like, somebody hates this.
Right.
So, like, I go to the thread, and someone's like, puppy expert here.
Right.
Puppies only play with balls when they're terrified. So this person probably killed them. Fuck you, delete your Twitter. And I'm just like, extra entertainment.
Right, yeah. That was worth the dive.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, man, I cannot believe that person exists, and that makes me a little sad.
Yeah.
But I loved that puppy video, and their insane comment made me laugh a little.
Right.
So, like, you know what? Look at that. Double dose right here. Like, out of one tweet. So I want to circle way back around to the introvert-extrovert thing that all this kind of spawned from. What were, because you said you figured out kind of like the balance. You always thought that you were extroverted and all that sort of stuff. So what was growing up like? What was Matt like growing up?
Matt, so growing up, Matt was bullied in elementary school. And so ended up moving so I was in like a private school. It wasn't the best fit. Ended up moving to public school. Really found my people there. So like lots of different people there, which was great. And like really loved like being creative, but also loved science. I don't know. I was like a kid with many interests. Had a lot of friends once I moved to the new school, and it was great. I had a great childhood, I would say. But I would say that the bullying has definitely stayed with me sort of throughout, adulthood. Something that, you don't get over it necessarily, but you learn how to deal with sort of the scars left behind by that. Mm-hmm. And so that's something that has carried forward with me. Yeah, I don't know. I had like a really normal, like other than that, like really normal childhood, great parents, good family, and like, was really privileged to grow up where I did and go to the great school that I went to. High school, I feel like my type A personality really started to like come out in high school a little bit. So, always trying to like get the best grade, you know, do the best projects. I was very like over the top with like any sort of projects where there was a video element we were allowed to do. So like I started like getting into that aspect of things and, you know, sort of flexing that creative muscle, and then was really involved in marching band and runner drum line, things like that. And then I go to college and really sort of like my type A personality went into like overdrive. So I was studying nonstop. I was very driven by grades, you know, getting, you know, straight A's, things like that. Very concerned about like what I'm doing with my life and things like that. Still had time to have fun and, you know, make friends, but I feel like maybe I lost out on some experiences because I was so like, I have to be in the library studying all the time. Like even this past weekend with the OSU game versus Notre Dame, like I had a flashback to like studying in the library on like game day Saturday and like toting my like really heavy book bag back across campus and like people like yelling at me for studying on a game day. And, like
Right.
just felt like this huge nerd, which is fine. I own that now. But like that went into overdrive, and then grad school hits. It's the completely like different format. Nothing is structured like undergrad. It's very, you know, kind of like basically a job, right? And so you're still hitting benchmarks and things like that. And then after grad school, going into the real world, like I think that is where I really started to shift a little bit and sort of realize that like outside of the structure of like academia and being a student, you know, it almost is like the Friends song, like no one told you life was going to be this way.
Yeah,
and so
yeah.
like I didn't hit that till I was like 28, right? Because I had spent so long in school. And so it was a little bit of like almost like a culture shock for me of like, oh, hey, like there's no benchmark to hit necessarily. Like you're living life, you're doing your work, you're getting your work done, but like the calculation is different. And so I think that's where I started to really dive more into sort of like self-discovery and like understanding more about myself and how I can move through the world and live in the world and things like that. So that's the Cliff Notes version.
Yeah, yeah. So, and obviously we can talk about whatever you do
Yeah.
or do not want. Like let's dive into like the bullying stuff a little bit
Yeah.
more. Like
Yeah.
what, like so why did it? And obviously there's no like answer like, oh well the bullies thought this, but like where did it come from? Like
Yeah, I think a couple places. So I think part of it was I didn't really fit in super well. So like the school where I was, the kids were primarily from, you know, very wealthy families. My family was not super wealthy. Again, fully recognizing I was incredibly privileged growing up, but like maybe not to that level. I was not particularly athletic. I was chubby. Most of my friends were girls, which was like a huge thing. And so like it was one of those things that I just didn't really fit in. And kids are, you know, they can see that and they'll take advantage of that. And so, you know, I did have some friends there. And, you know, looking back on it, it's like, oh, it wasn't all bad. But like in the moment, like it was not great. And the fact that I can look back on it and see the shift of like when I went from that private school to public school and like had more options for like groups to fit in with, like the whole like relief that was there, and like the fact that I felt like I could actually like live my life in 7th grade, like that, looking back on it now, like that was huge. That was a total like 180 for me.
yeah.
Yeah.
So when do you come out? Like is that during these phases or like anything?
Yeah.
Sorry if that's like a deep dive.
No,
like
hey,
jump in.
I'm
like,
happy to talk about it. No.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that, you know, a lot of gay people will tell you like, oh, I've always kind of known, but like,
Right.
it's, you know it, but you don't necessarily have the words to describe it. So my coming out process was very much a process. So
Okay.
I had girlfriends all through high school, started to like discover that I liked guys like in high school. And then when I went to college, of course, you're away from home, things like that. You meet different people. Like, I don't think I really knew, like, there were gay people at my high school, but at that time it was still sort of like hush hush, you know? And people in high school would, even like one of my girlfriends in high school was like, are you gay? And I was like, no, of course not.
Right.
But like, I definitely was. And so going to college and like meeting people that are living like as openly gay men and things like that, and meeting people that could talk to me about their experience of like coming out and things like that, that was very pivotal for me. And so even all through undergrad, I had these like groups of friends that I was very openly gay with. A lot of my friends I was not openly gay with because there was still some stigma around it in different factions of my friend groups. And I really in grad school started coming out to like more people, but I didn't come out to my parents till I was 28. So like, and like, of course, like they knew, like, I mean, I hadn't dated anyone in years and like, you know, avoided all talk of like relationships with them, and the signs are there, but there were certain things that like, you know, kind of held me back from coming out to them. And when I did, I'm again so lucky to have an incredibly supportive family that it was a non-issue, and to this day like remains a non-issue.
Yeah.
Which is like, again, I feel like so lucky because that's not the same story for a lot of people, but it has shaped sort of like how I live my life. So when I came out to my parents, I was like, I had every plan of leaving Columbus after grad school, and if I left Columbus, I might not have told them right away. But when I found a job in Columbus, I was like, hey, I'm gonna stay in Columbus. My parents moved up here now. My sister lives up here, and I was like, I have to tell them because I feel like I'm keeping part of myself from them. It's hindering our relationship, and I don't want that.
Right.
So I did that, and like now, to me, it's like I am very openly and proudly gay, and it's one of those things that it's going to play, it's not my whole personality, but it plays a part in my life. I was actually just talking to my professional society about sort of careers being gay and things like that, and how even when I was in school looking for different jobs, there were jobs in locations that like, oh, that job's really cool, I feel incredibly qualified for it, I can't live in Twin Falls, Idaho. Like, one, because I'm single and like the pool is, you know, a little bit more limited there, but like, but also like I don't know if I would feel safe there, and so like it's one of those things that it's not necessarily actively holding me back per se, but it limits my options for career stuff and things like that. So I really like living openly and like talking about it, because I think that it's something that, you know, it's something that affects a lot of decisions that I make still. And I'm very lucky to have like, you know, white male privilege and things like that, obviously, like, but having this gay perspective, I think, still shifts. It gives me a little bit of a unique perspective in some ways too. So like I don't know, this whole like, you have to recognize the privilege that you do have and things like that too. So I try and apply that sort of everyday life.
Yeah, well, I think it's the balance with anyone doing anything or being anything. It's just like the introvert extrovert thing. Like there's always kind of a give and take with both things. It's like, hey, because like every time I share like a hardship on this show, I always stop myself and downplay what I'm about to say, and then I say it. I'm always like, yeah, you know, growing up was like, you know, I'm about to explain this not fun thing that I experienced growing up.
Yeah.
But I'm also going to stop and be like, well, let me just preface by saying that other people have it worse, and it's okay, and it's not that bad. But it's like we always, I feel like, downplay our own perspectives, because it is kind of like that balance of like, I can identify like, yeah, there was obviously, you know, clearly the natural privilege that I would have, and how, yes, I can identify like, things could have been worse in different ways,
exactly,
and all this sort of stuff. And I can say that, and I can also say, but this stuff really sucked a lot. You know what I mean? So it is kind of always that give and take of like, yes, we know, like, yes, you've got these privileges, or you've got these, like, hey, we weren't mega poor, but we weren't super rich either.
Right.
And I'm sure even if you were super rich, there's still going to be something like a caveat that you're like, well, we were super rich, however, this thing. So it's like, we all kind of have those like
our lived experiences that kind of influence who we are today, and
exactly. So we're always going to have those like, hey, when I'm sharing this thing, I'm sharing it from my perspective because this is how it made me feel. And somebody else can be like, oh, well, that doesn't make any sense. You know what I mean? Somebody could be listening to, our Tinder talk earlier and be like, I love Tinder. What are you talking about? Who cares? You're not judging anybody. It's the whole point of the app. But we're going to sit and be like, yeah, but it makes me feel weird.
Right.
You know, like I feel strange for that, right?
Yeah.
So around 28, like, is that like, did you feel like any sort of a weight lifted off your shoulders where you're like, cool, I'm officially who I am. Like, I'm doing the things I want to do. Or was it like, hey, you know what? Cool. We're good.
Definitely a weight off the shoulders. I mean, like, hyping myself up. I'm like, so they live like by like a strip mall. So I'm like sitting in the parking lot of the strip mall, like listening to pump up music, and like I'm like, this is the night. I'm gonna tell them. Like, I had to psych myself up to do it.
Can I ask what you were listening to? Do you remember?
The 1975.
Oh,
yeah,
perfect.
Oh yeah, like
Yep,
like but
perfect.
like songs about like wanting to be loved and like yeah.
Perfect.
Probably a little bit of Carly Rae Jepsen too, just because
Love it.
But like I had to psych myself up for it, but I don't feel like it's like I came out, this is who I am, because like I feel like I'm still, and I don't know if this ever goes away, right? Like you're always sort of discovering new things about yourself, and I think that what it has done for me is helped me sort of shift the way that I deal with that. So I am, feeling more confident in the things that I don't know about myself. And when I do learn something new about myself, it's like, oh, that's great. I can embrace that too. And so it was definitely a shift for me, but the journey continues.
Right. Well, I think that's almost the coolest key to be able to find to unlock the things is the confidence part. Right.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily like, oh, anything I do is now changed and all this sort of stuff. But it's like, I have this new level of confidence that, just like you said, when you discover a new part about yourself, because we all will always be, or should always be, identifying new parts of ourselves and new things we like and dislike and things we want to learn or whatever. We should always be growing, right? But I think that's the important part, is the confidence that you can unlock to let yourself embrace the new things. Because when you have that lack of confidence, you often push away the things.
Right.
I feel, or at least it's very easy to push away the things. Like, oh no, I couldn't do that. I couldn't try that creative thing that I want to try, or I couldn't be that person, or I couldn't become that business owner. Like whatever it is, that lack of confidence is what often prevents us, obviously, from trying those new things or embracing that new part of us, where I think when you unlock that confidence, you're like, oh, yeah, here's a new thing that I need to figure out about me. Let's do it.
Right, and that's something that I feel like I have been like really actively working on. So like I said, tasting Columbus, really outside of my comfort zone, things like that, is I felt this real lack of confidence. And during the pandemic, I was like, hey, I have the time, I'm going to start seeing a therapist, things like that. And like that has been really healthy for me to sort of embrace myself and sort of understand how I can take up space and things like that. It's been very transformational for me, and now I recommend, of course, like a lot of people that go to therapy, like, hey, everyone should do therapy. It's great,
right?
And I want everyone to have that benefit, and so I'm always learning, always growing, but feeling more confident about the process.
What do you feel like you're still carrying with you, whether positive or negative, from the bullying stuff? Like, what do you feel like you learned from that, or?
Yeah, well, I think it's one of those things that, and this is something that, recognizing through talking with sort of like a third party that, is objective and will tell you the truth. Like, I was a very sensitive child, and, up until, I'm still a very sensitive person. And so like, even probably previously, like people joking with me, like it was hard for me to take a joke about myself, things like that. And I think that is a factor that came from that, because you come from this base of just feeling like completely rejected. And so like a lot of it too in dating, initially for me, it was like the rejection piece that comes with dating, just like naturally, like that was really hard to deal with. And so learning to embrace it and recognize that it's not really, like, not everything's about you. That's the thing. Like when you are bullied as a kid, it is a weird, I had to like ask my therapist, I was like, am I a narcissist? Because I feel like we keep saying things are not about me, but like I don't actively think that things are about me, but like because I do, then it makes me feel worse. And she's like, no, you're not a narcissist. Like, but like, it's one of those things that you have to sort of take it off of your own shoulders and be like, yeah, I was rejected. That's that person's problem because I'm actually great. And these are the reasons why I'm a catch. And so like that has been a real shift for me in how I think about myself and deal with it. But I do think that early life bullying sort of like led up to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I can relate a lot to that in the sense of, like you were saying, maybe like can't take a joke all the time, right?
Yeah.
So I am still pretty bad about that. And
Yeah.
while I absolutely can take part in, the fun roasting back and forth between people and friends and all that sort of stuff, like I've learned to be able to be like, yeah, we're just kidding around. But it's still like, it's almost like I'm taking an actual punch and it hurts, but I'm like, we're just having fun. I'm like, it still hurts,
I'm
but
gonna
we're
cry
having
about
fun.
this
It's
later.
fine.
Yeah.
Because so like I grew up for the first, or well, not first, but like until I was about 12 or 13, I had a hugely like mentally abusive stepmom in my life. And she was a bully, absolutely a bully. So like at home, I was getting this constant barrage of just like everything, right? Of just like bad parenting and also just normal person bullying me. You know what I mean? So it was like,
Right.
if it wasn't happening at school, I was coming home terrified, right? So because she would constantly berate me and like make fun of everything that I would do, I now as an adult, like it took me years to uncover like, oh wait, that's because she used to do, at least for
Yeah.
me, I feel like that's where a lot of it comes from.
Yeah.
Is like when I would do something and she'd be like, oh, that's really like, and would just bully me about it. I'm like, oh, that's why you're not good at taking a joke now.
Right.
Because when a friend, if I see a friend and they're like, oh, hey man, what's up? Like, thought you were dead. Nice shirt, asshole. I'm like, so you didn't care if I died and you hate my shirt? Like, that kind of hurts. Like, I just wanted to say hi to you and give you a hug and say I missed you. Like that's what I'd rather do. And they want to do that too, but just their way of initiating the, because
Right.
that's a lot of normal people's, you roast somebody and like,
Yeah.
I don't necessarily love it, but that's just very, very normal for a lot of people to do. But I also know I don't love it because I had that experience growing
Right.
up where it made me build up this huge wall of like, oh, when this person or entity does these things to me, it hurts.
Yep.
So I don't want that anymore.
Right.
So now I always have to, like, literally every single time a friend makes a joke at me about me, I have to mental jujitsu myself into being like, they're just kidding. Like, within a
Yep.
matter of seconds of like, they're just kidding. Don't get bummed out. They don't mean it. It's cool. Joke with them too. Just have a normal engagement. You know what I mean? So like, I feel like I can relate a lot in that sense where like, I am still actively trying to get better at taking jokes and not, like something else I've had to get better at is the next layer of like when you want to engage in the roast with them,
Right.
not being super mean back.
Yeah.
That's my thing is like when someone's like,
It's like, oh, you want to play?
exactly, like that is literally it. Like, and I try so hard to catch myself because like I will just immediately go for the throat.
Yep.
They might be like, nice shirt, asshole. And I'm like, oh yeah, well fucking that thing you did last week sucked and I
Yeah.
hope it fails.
Yeah.
They're like, dang, dude, I was just, you know what I mean? Like, so I immediately, like, because my defenses are immediately up. So I'm like,
Yep.
oh, they're trying to hurt me. I need to hurt them back. When that's not actually the case. That's
Yeah.
just how they say hi,
And I think the other thing that, and maybe you'll relate to this too, is like, it almost brings this like need to please people a lot. So like, just like this sort of like playing in the background of how you grew up of like constantly in my instance, like really trying to fit in and like win the approval of peers. Like that is something the people pleasing and needing to adapt myself to like someone's idea of good or perfect, like, and almost like kind of do that in different situations. Like I still find myself being like, oh, you can advocate for yourself here. Like you don't have to just be completely give in and things like that. And I've gotten a little bit better at that. I have a long way to go about like advocating for myself and like standing up for myself. Mm-hmm. But like that has been another piece that I've really carried forward.
What are some of the things you've done to kind of balance that people-pleasing mentality?
To me, it's been like, I just have to take the leap and like be like, and almost question myself because it almost happens subconsciously of like, I'll just change my mind. And I'm like, wait a minute, why did I change my mind? They're still wrong. And here's why. And like, and I hate like arguing with people.
Same.
And so like, I have been fortunate to like have some good mentors that have like helped me understand, some experiences that helped me understand how to like artfully sort of like contradict someone and still walk away from it like, I'm not coming at you, I'm just saying like, hey, I'm thinking about this differently, I'm right.
Yeah.
But like that, like I've learned to just take the step, like step back, think about like, why did you change your mind? Is a legit reason, or are you just trying to like avoid confrontation, please people, and things like that? And like do that calculation very quick, and then speak up and be like, actually, why don't we think about it this way? What do you think?
Yeah. So like that's a big thing I've tried to learn over the years is like the whole, confrontation sort of thing, right? Like how do you handle confrontation? And it's weird because I've like looking back at different points in my life, I've actually always been good at handling confrontation, but building up to it always feels way, way worse. So I always felt like I wasn't good at it. But I would often end up being the diffuser of a confrontation, right?
Yeah.
I would just, because I have this, and I don't necessarily know where this comes from. I should probably be talking to a therapist to help me uncover that, right? Which I would love to do. But I have this thing where like, if there's an issue and it's kind of eating away at me, I have to face it head on. Like I'm not good, and this is a good issue to have. I'm not good at just like continuously putting something aside and be like, no, I'll get to it later. If it keeps rearing its head, even the first couple times, I'm like, nah, that's not a big deal. If it keeps showing up, I have this like weird, like it literally eats away at me.
Yeah.
If I don't just go and confront the thing and say, hey, this is an issue. How can we solve it? And we're either going to solve it in a positive way, or, oh, we need to not communicate anymore, or this is the, whatever it may be. Because I feel like I'm naturally a problem solver. I always look for, all right, what's the solution here? What can we do? Like 100%, that's where I lead all the time. But it's those big things where I'm like, this is going to be a confrontation. This is going to be an awkward conversation. This is going to be something strange.
Yeah.
And the little bit of the people pleasing in me is like, I don't want to, yes, in a joking manner, I'll go for someone's throat, but in a real conversation, I never really want to do that, right? I never really obviously wanted to get to that point where it's like, oh, you're fucking, whatever.
Yeah.
But I have this tendency to just like, I want to just like, nope, bull by the horns, let's just go.
Yep.
Rather than like, oh, let's tiptoe around it. Like, hey, remember that problem we're sort of kind of having? We're maybe having it, but not really if you don't think it's a problem. But I'm just like, no, this is an issue.
Yeah.
And this is a problem. Is there a solution?
And I feel like that's the type of confrontation that like is healthy. Like you're not coming at it from an aggressive point of view. Like it's like you got to call a spade and like just say like, hey, like let's talk about this and let's talk it out, because how else are you going to move forward?
Yeah.
But it also I think ties into, and this is another thing that I would say, it kind of ties into being able to take a joke about yourself, but the idea of like taking criticism well. I used to be terrible at taking criticism. I'm getting better because I think I criticize myself so much, but like just would take everything so personally.
Yep.
And like that's how, if someone confronts you about something, you take it so personally. It's like it doesn't have to be personal. You can just like get the facts out there and move on. And that's something that maybe it's me getting older, maybe it's me like actually improving as I work on myself, but like it's the idea that you don't have to take criticism personally, especially if it's from like even if friends were like telling me things and like providing criticism, I would just react badly to it.
Yeah.
And it's like they only want the best for you, so just take it, grow from it, and like learn.
That's something I'm trying to get better at, not turning criticism or disagreement or whatever it may be, or lack of interest. I don't know, whatever it is. Like I'm trying to take those things not as disrespect, because I have uncovered that I do have a tendency to often very easily feel disrespected. And again, not in a way where I'm like, what the fuck, because I don't like arguing with anybody at all. I don't care. You know what I mean? I'm not that person who's like, yeah, let me expend energy on this Twitter thread. I'm puppy expert here. No, I don't. That's fine. Whatever. Unless, of course, it builds to a thing that needs confronted, right? So it's that balance, it's that give and take.
Right.
But I have a tendency to like, I don't know, I feel like I can easily feel disrespected. And I feel like a lot of that does kind of come from the stepmom thing of like often being disrespected as a child or another human being, by that person, right? Of like, oh, your opinion doesn't matter, what you want doesn't matter, blah, blah, blah. So I think I've naturally carried that with me to where if somebody is like, I don't know, even small things, like, again, it doesn't make me angry, but it makes me bummed out because of the disrespect. Like if I were like, hey, Matt, do you want to come do this podcast I do? It's really awesome, blah, blah, blah. And even if you were like, yeah, cool, your little podcast thing sounds fun, I guess. I'll do it sometime soon. I know you don't mean anything wrong by that, right?
Right.
But how I rearrange those words is, wow, I just got disrespect. He doesn't give a shit about my... He thinks it's nothing. He thinks it's meaningless. Is it meaningless? Like, so it's like I immediately dive into those self-criticizing things because I have this tendency to immediately feel disrespected. And again, it doesn't turn into like anger. It more so is just like me beating myself up of like, why do they think that?
Yeah.
You know, and then of course, yes, that can lead to being on the defense. You know, next time Matt and I DM and I'm like, hey man, do you still want to do the podcast? Like, I know you don't like it. You know, it's like,
right. Let me get passive aggressive here real quick.
yeah, exactly. And it's like, and again, not that it, you know, necessarily going to lead with that, but that's going to be the tendency. It's going to be the feeling, right? Of like, now I am going to approach this from the defense.
Yep.
And then does that bubble up into, oh, I need to confront this head on.
Right.
And like, hey man, did you really not want to be on the show because you don't like, you know, it's again, there's not a lot of situations where it ends up getting to that. And a lot of this is more so inner battles that I have with myself. But it is always like, it's right in the nose of just that, like, I sometimes can't take the joke or can't take the criticism. Yeah. And then sometimes I'm always just wondering, like, did they just mean that in a very casual way or is it genuine disrespect? Because like that, and I think this is a good thing to have carried into the creative and freelance world is like, I have learned to not let people walk all over me. Because early on in the years, I'm like, oh my God, I just need work. I just need someone to hire me. Please hire me. Walk all over me. It's fine. Now that's turned very much into like, oh, I can use that disrespect factor of like, oh, no, you're not going to, I feel disrespected. And that's not how this is going to work.
Right.
So we're just not going to work together if that's the case. Like, so it has turned into like kind of a benefit in that way. Because especially in the freelance creative world, people are getting taken advantage of left and right.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like, now it's easy for me to use that diffuser of like, hey, we might have a conflict right now. I'm not going to write you some scathing email, but I am going to be very straightforward and let you know that I felt disrespected in this process. Yep. And hope that you can take something positive away from this, even if it's just not hearing from me again, that's okay.
Right.
Like, we still address the issue.
Yep.
And now can we move on?
Yeah. Because even if you were going to work with them after the fact and you didn't say something like that, you would just resent them.
Exactly. Yeah. Because then you build up like that. And like, I've had to have weird conversations with friends sometimes about even the discomfort that I get with the kind of roasting and the jokes and all that sort of stuff. Like, I've had to have some weird conversation with friends who are like, hey, I know this is how you communicate, but I need you to understand that it actually really hurts me in these ways. I know you don't mean harm, but it does harm to me. Yeah. So can we find a new way to communicate? Yep. Yeah, and it's an awkward conversation, but most of the time everyone's like, "Oh shit, yeah, no, I never meant any of that, right?" You know, but it's like it is just like doing that because when I wouldn't say anything, it did build up a resentment. Yeah. I was like, "Man, I don't want to be around that friend. I don't want to hang out with that friend because they treat me this way." Right. Even though they're not meaning to treat me that way, that's just who they are. Right. And who I am might not mesh with them, but there's a way. Again, the ebb and flow of everything. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, like I need to address to that person, hey, this is how you make me feel when you do these things. And hopefully if they're a good understanding person, they can be like, oh, okay, I need to bring my level down a little bit to meet you more at where you are so I don't make you uncomfortable. And truthfully, whenever I've had those conversations, they work. That's the magic of it, right? Of confronting the thing.
And that's the sign of a good friendship too, where it's like your friend is like, oh, I do care about you. I don't want you to feel that way. And I'm like, if I was doing something that would make my friends feel uncomfortable, I would want them to tell me because I don't want them to resent me. I want to stay friends with them.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay, so I feel like I don't even know how long we've been talking, but like I feel like we could talk forever. Yeah. I would love to dive into what's on the horizon for you, or what would you want to be on the horizon? Like what's next? Is it like, hey, I love doing Tasting Columbus. I want to keep doing it for as long as possible, or man, I've got this secret idea that I'd love to see it expand into this, or you personally would like to expand. Like, do you want to host more things? Do you want to do more of your own stuff? Like,
I have always had, so I would love to do Tasting Columbus as long as they will have me because it's really fun. Like, I get a lot of joy out of it, and I would love to do it forever, really. But I've always I'll have these ideas of a cool science communication thing I want to do or things like that, and then I am the type of person, and this is to a fault, I think, where it's like I have to have the idea perfect and have like things lined up before I even try to do anything. And then it gets into the cycle of not doing it because I don't know how to start, and then like can't like, so it's, I have ideas, I'd love to do them, but I need to get out of my own head a little bit on that. And I think it's coming to a point where I'm getting more comfortable with myself and things like that, where I feel like I can try and just like do it, but it's not a matter of not having ideas of like things that I think would be cool and that I think other people would like enjoy and learn something from or something like that. Like I want to share my knowledge with the world. I want to share my curiosity with the world, but I just like, it's a weird form of like creative block, I guess. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And I have been there so many times and still actively get there. Like we've talked about a little bit, like I can flex that perfectionism muscle too often, right? Where I'm like, I want it to be this, and the vision in my head is this. It's even the stuff we were talking about earlier of like setting your bar, right? And all that sort of stuff. Like I will often be like, this is what I want to do. And if it's not this, then like, there's no point. But like the one thing that I've drilled into my head over the last like couple years of really getting this stuff under control is like the idea that like done is better than perfect.
Right.
And oftentimes we downplay, like, I feel like our ability to do something, right? Because we're never, when you unlock some confidence, that helps, but we're never going to be perfectly confident, right?
Right.
Ever. Because life also changes, so your confidence level also has to change with that, right? But like the whole idea of done being better than perfect is like, oftentimes like our idea of done is probably even better done than someone else's version of done. So it's like, what is the perfect thing? Because if you started up your own, version of Tasting Columbus podcast or whatever it is, and you could be like, yeah, but it's not this. I'm going to look at it and be like, yeah, but it's this, and that's so cool.
But I feel like it's also it comes back into this like little bit of like a fear of rejection type of thing of like kind of being like, this is something, a passion project of mine, and then like having people not watch it or like not getting the views for whatever reason. And it's just like thinking forward to that sort of like that like doomsday type of like mentality. That's something that like in a lot of aspects of my life I've been able to break out of, but it's like that this is sort of like the last frontier for it with me.
Yeah. And it's hard. It's hard because I mean, every single time that I release an episode of this show, or I just started up another show, which I'd actually love to talk to you more about improv, because it is an improv comedy podcast.
Fun. Okay.
But like, I just started up a brand new show and all this sort of stuff, and I'm for sure like, no one's gonna like it. 5 people are gonna care about it. It's not getting millions of views or even thousands. But it's like the hardest unlock, and you're 100% correct with it. Like the hardest unlock is being okay with whatever version it becomes. Right. And that is an inner battle that everyone's constantly having with everything. And I do too. And it's like, I feel like what worked for me is just like unlocking that little extra bit that was like, okay, here's just enough of this that I'm doing for me. I'm going to let myself be selfish in this sense and say that like I can sit and like, I think I told you this before we were recording. There's thousands of podcasts that exist just like What You Don't Hear.
Right.
It's just sitting down with somebody and it's life stories and all this sort of stuff. And there's podcasts that have like Leonardo DiCaprio on for those interviews, and those are super way cool, right?
Right.
And so I could sit and I could be like, what value does mine have?
Right.
But one, the value right off the top is, well, like I joked about earlier, it's a cheat code for me to become friends with somebody, right? Yeah. But it's also like, I know it's proving to be giving the value to other people that I hoped it was giving, of like, hey, even if 50 people listen to an episode, one, I'm still stoked that 50 people listened, right? I would love that for that to be 50,000, but the 50 is still cool. Yeah. And I'm not, it's a really hard battle to not get caught up in the numbers, but we have to program ourselves not to. Right. Battling this, new growth of social media. Right. Because I don't think we're adapt to handle what social media is giving to us right now. So we have to, we got to remind ourselves also we're evolving with this thing and learning how to, not take a hate comment personally and be like, oh, they don't matter. Yeah. Like we've talked about continuously throughout this episode. But for me, it was like learning to detach, like, okay, the numbers are one thing, and am I going to work to make a presentable and solid show where the numbers hopefully grow? Absolutely. I'm not going to pretend like I don't want sponsors for this show, or that I don't want it to be an active form of income for me, or I don't want it to be well produced with lights and cameras and all this sort of stuff. Like, yes, those are all, that's my bar, right? And I could always want it to be better. But it's like identifying that bar of like the external bar almost of like, what do I want it to be in a presentable way? So what do I want someone to think or feel when they ingest this?
Right.
You know, so somebody looks at this podcast and is like, dude, your production quality is really good for that. Okay, awesome. That means you know I take it seriously. Yeah. And then what's the internal bar? What am I getting out of it? And it's like, and those things are always, you know, there's always going to be a push and a pull of like, this one's higher, no, that one's higher. And it is a battle, but like that's the biggest thing that I've told myself over and over. It's like, yes, the done is better than perfect thing. That doesn't mean that I never want something to be perfect. I try too hard to make a lot of things too perfect. But I have been able to balance that out and be like, yeah, but I want to do this. And I think you even said this earlier, like if there's something that you like, there's a high percentage that there's other people out there that like it too. Right. So it's like the audience is already there, and again, there's a whole other conversation of algorithms and TikToks and all this sort of stuff of how you get your eye or get those people's eyes on your stuff. Yeah. That is difficult. Yeah. But it's kind of, and I know this is a really cliche thing I'm saying, but like those eyes are never going to find it if it never exists. Right. And so that's constantly what I tell myself of like when I launched the improv comedy show, I'm like, you're not an actual comedian. You've never actually done improv. You just, I've just loved it forever. Yeah. And I love being fun. I love comedy, but I'm not a comedian. Who are you to say that you have an improv comedy show? Like, how dare you? You know what I mean? Right. Like, you're going to post it and there's going to be comedians somewhere laughing at you being like, this fucking dickhead thinks he can go and make a comedy show.
It's like the imposter syndrome.
Exactly. But like, I was like, you know what? I'm going to have fun with this though. Yeah. Because I know where my bar of like, I'm going to make it a legit thing. So, and that's a little bit of like a building a wall of like, I'm going to make it as close to perfect as I can. So no one can actually say there's less for them to pick apart about it. Yeah. But I also was like, I just want to do it bad enough that I'm going to keep everything reeled in. Like the production quality that I do for that show, it's less than this production quality. So I was like, okay, I don't want to do this for 2 shows. But, you know, I do have lighting for it, but I use like 1 camera setup, and that might change at some point, sure, everything grows. But like I just do a 1 camera setup. I've already got the mics and everything. There's 3 people that are on every show. Right. And so it's like, okay, I just tossed up a light. It's way simpler than this setup. Toss up a light, toss up 1 camera angle, and it works. And I was fine with it. You know, could I think of 100 different ways it could be way cooler? Absolutely. Right. But I also know that, like, 1, I just want it to exist because it's never going to have the chance to get cooler if it doesn't start somewhere. Right. Right. And also for me to be able to physically even be able to pull off, you know, 2 shows at once amongst everything else that I'm doing, I needed it to be simple. So even from a logistical standpoint, and I know I'm getting like really detailed here, but even from a logistical standpoint, I was like, okay, how am I going to simultaneously do What You Don't Hear and this improv show at the same time? Well, okay, I'll do the improv show in seasons. So literally within 3 weeks, I recorded 18 episodes. Oh, wow. And I got them because I just committed. I was like, okay, like, and that's not committing 24 hours of my every day. It's just being good with scheduling stuff, right? Yeah. But it's coming in and knowing like, okay, I've got my 1 light set up and my 1 camera. Do the mics work? Cool. I've got the people scheduled. Now it's just time to sit down and joke. Right. You know what I mean? And yes, watching some of the episodes back, I'm like, oh, that joke isn't as funny as I thought it. Like the perfectionism, right? Right. But it also doesn't matter because it exists, because it's done. Right. And so it's like taking all of those sort of things, like that's how I've been able to do What You Don't Hear for almost 3 years, is I batch all the episodes. Right. So right now, as you and I are recording, over the next 2 weeks, I'm recording altogether, I'll do like around like 6 episodes. Okay. I release bi-weekly. So 6 episodes gets me 2, 4, 6. That's 3 months of this show existing more. But I don't have to stress about it for that 3 months. Right. So it's like, I know I'm getting so... No, I'm actually learning a lot. I should have brought a notepad. Hey, well, you know what? This is recorded, so you can watch it back. Oh, perfect. Oh, you're right. But that's kind of my go-to that I've figured out a structure for so many things of like,
Right.
because I am a person who like, I almost have an addiction to making so many different things, right? That's why I started this episode being like, I'm jealous that you get to do something like Tasting Columbus, because while I can't sit and say, oh, I love food and food science as much as you, I love just being a part of things.
Yes.
Right? So again, my bar is different. I would love to walk around and say, yeah, I do this this web series about these things. You know, that's why I wanted to do the coffee idea.
Yeah.
I don't even like coffee, but I was like, this is a fun thing that would allow me to, you know, add something else to the list that's like a fun, creative thing.
Yeah.
So the point I'm making is I sort of have this addiction to just doing everything that comes to my mind. Once I can figure out, is there a logical way that I can pull it off? And then once I figure out, well, it could work in this way, you know, break the dream down into a goal and then the goal down into a plan. And it's like, okay, what's the plan? Is the plan doable? Well, then why would I tell myself I can't do it? And if I do tell myself I can't do it, that actually means I actually don't want to do it.
Right.
And I know that I don't know, maybe that could sound harsh to somebody, be like, no, what the hell? Why would you tell me I don't actually? But it's like, that is the part of me that, you know, will kind of agree with, you know, some Gary Vee stuff, if you're familiar with Gary Vee, like this social media guy. Anyway, he says a lot of like overly hype, you know, sort of, so like, if you're not trying hard, then you're blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, all right, dude, calm down.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of like that sort of stuff that's like, well, if you can identify like, well, hey, if you really want to do the thing, but you're not doing the thing and you're not taking the steps to do the thing, I don't necessarily know if you want it that bad. Like I could tell myself that about going to the gym for years.
Yeah.
Because I would sit every day and I would mentally beat myself up over, why don't you go to the gym? You should have just went, blah, blah, blah. But I would, you know, didn't know where to start, didn't know all this sort of stuff, right? And I'm just like, and I'm just sitting and I'm watching myself physically become something that I don't like and all this sort of stuff. And then that just creates a larger cycle.
Yep.
And I would beat myself up and beat myself up. But at the same time, I would tell myself, well, you don't want it that bad, or you would have found out a way to go. It's almost like the hitting rock bottom sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
It's like almost it takes that to be finally be like, okay.
No, I do want it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, now I have to. It's like the resistance band sort of thing. Like you keep pulling it back and pulling it back and pulling it back. There's a lot of room that it can be pulled back for.
Right.
But at some point, you can't anymore. And then it releases and then it shoots you super far forward, right?
Right.
Then there's the progress.
Right.
That was the gym for me. I could identify like, yes, I was beating myself up all the time and being like, you're so lazy, I feel terrible, I look terrible, all these sort of things that I was thinking about myself.
Yep.
But I also in the same breath could sit and say, well, you don't want it that bad because you're not going to the gym.
Right.
So you haven't hit that breaking point yet that's like, I have to.
Yep.
Right? I'm currently that way. So even though I have a gym routine down of like 5 or 6 days a week, I'm not a healthy eater. And I will sit and sometimes I'm like, you need to eat better, blah, blah, blah. But then I order a whole pizza and I eat it. And I'm like, well, you don't want to eat healthy that bad.
I know,
and I can identify, and I can be like, oh, you're right. You're right.
What I want to eat that bad? That whole pizza?
Yeah, you know what I do want that bad? That last slice of pizza.
Yeah.
Toss it on over here. Like, so it's like I can identify those things. So I take that a lot into the creative world. It's like, do I really want this? And if I'm continuing to think about it, what is it that I'm going to do about it?
Right.
And again, it's breaking down the dream to a goal to a plan sort of thing. So again, starting up a second show, I was like, man, that'd be so fun. I've been doing What You Don't Hear long enough now that I've got its system and processes in place. I know how to keep that show afloat.
Right.
All right, I really want to start this other one. I want it to be different. I really want to do comedy. I love improv, all this sort of stuff. What could it be? And then one night, the idea hit, just like floodgates open and everything, the perfect moment, right? Where it's like, oh my God, I know exactly what to do. But then it became, okay, that's really cool and that's really hype and that's really exciting to think about.
Yeah.
But how do you do it?
Yeah.
But then, again, I sat down and I was like, okay, well, this is how.
Right.
Because, again, the bar that I set for the show of how I do it is up to me. I don't have to make it a thing that I do 12 months out of the year. Oh, I can do a couple seasons a year.
Right.
And that means I can record a handful of episodes within maybe a 1-month time period. And I can have a show for 3 months, 4 months, whatever it may be. And then, yes, you got to keep up with promoting it and using social media and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
That's an extra layer. But I'm also like, I'm fine with doing all of that. And the answer kind of comes down to like, did I actually want to do it?
Right.
And the answer was like, well, yes, I really, really did because I loved the idea.
Right.
And that's not me downplaying anybody who's struggling to start something up or anything. Like, I don't want anybody listening or watching this to be like, Okay, asshole. Like, just because I can't start it tomorrow.
Hey,
like,
fuck you. Yeah.
No. I'm not saying you have to start it tomorrow or you're failing. Like, it's just like maybe you haven't hit that right time where it just kind of unlocks for you. You haven't hit the
Right.
moment where it's clicking.
Right.
And I think sometimes it does take a little bit of extra, planning, a little bit of extra thought process of like, let's literally make a pros and a cons list. Let's think about like, do I really want to do this or does it just sound exciting?
Right.
Because again, going back to my like idea addiction, I have a lot of ideas
Yep.
that sound very exciting. And then I'm like, wait, I don't actually, like the coffee show that I told you
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
I was really hyped on that for a second. We actually filmed a pilot episode for it. But then, guess who didn't edit it? Me. Guess who didn't finish it? Me. Because, and I could sit and I could be like, you know what? Like, yes. I actually just got somebody to actually take on the edit for it recently.
Oh,
so
nice.
it still might exist,
Okay.
you know?
All right. Good.
So it's at least not an unfinished project. But I could sit and I could tell myself, well, you didn't actually want it that bad, did you? You know,
Right.
yes, you wanted to do it. I'm not going to say I didn't, because I still would love to, right? I still would love the opportunity for that show to pop back up and become a thing. That would be very fun.
Right.
But at the time when I was the most hyped about it, maybe I was just a little bit more excited about the idea, the prospect of it, than the actual work or planning that needed to go into it.
Right.
Because after doing that first episode, it was fun, and I was like, this is cool.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, cool, man, edit it and get it done. Can't wait to see it. Oh, yeah.
Do I have to?
Do I really want to do that? You know, so I can identify in myself, I didn't want it that bad.
Right.
You know, and I can still sit here and tell you today, man, I'd love for that show to exist, but I'm not going to go home and edit it. I'm going to hope that the editor that's taking care of it is going to get it done. You know what I mean?
Right.
Now I'm like, hopefully you get it done. I really want to see it, but not that bad. You know, so it's like, I don't know if any of that or if that was just a ramble, but like, that's like my biggest thing that I always try to encourage people with, and that's not me saying I have the answers. That's not me saying my process works for anybody else. That's just me sharing. This is me downplaying my experience, right? This is what has worked for me.
Yeah.
Is identifying and keeping myself in check of, do I actually want the thing? Because I also think it allows ourselves to take pressure off our shoulders if we can just tell ourselves, maybe I don't want it that bad right now.
Right.
And that's okay. That doesn't mean that I'm a failure. It doesn't mean that I'm lazy. It doesn't actually mean anything. It just means that I'm not ready for that thing right now.
Exactly.
Whether it's going to the gym, starting a business, trying a new creative idea, downloading 10, like whatever
Right.
it is, right? It's anything.
Yeah.
Like, you have to identify, like, do you really want it? And then if you can say, I do want it, okay, then what are the steps, the tiniest of steps
Right.
you can start to take to figure it out?
And I think that like wanting it in the moment and like being able to act on it then, I think is really important, an important part of that, because it's like you can still want it, but like the not right now part, I think really rings in, because it's like maybe you're going through a period of change, and or maybe certain things are like stressing you out like long term, and it's like you got to sort of deal with those a little bit before, and like maybe working on a project would help take you out of that headspace or whatever, but and for me at least, it's like I need to like deal with some of those things first, because I don't know if I'm going to show my best work and like meet my own internal bar of like, or even meet the external bar of like what would be good. Like I want to bring my best self to it, even if it's going to flop. And
Right.
so like I have to be in the right space for it. And so I think that, you know, over the past couple of years, learning through Tasting Columbus about how to be on camera and be exciting and all that kind of stuff, like that was a good first step. It's like, okay, now I feel like I have more tools in my toolbox to actually like act on my ideas. So we'll see what it is.
Yeah.
I don't know yet.
Right.
But I have some thoughts, and you know, maybe they'll come to life.
Well, if you ever want to just ramble with someone about those thoughts and ideas, please let me know, because that is one of my
will.
favorite things to do. if of course we stay friends after this, we gotta see if the cheat code worked.
Yeah. Well, I'll have to rewatch the episode.
We'll see how it actually came together. But like, I'm literally so serious. I love talking to people about their ideas.
Yeah.
Not in the sense of like, let me give you the 5 keys to success, brother. More so just like, oh my God, I want to hear it. That sounds really cool. Let's think about it. Let's talk about it. Like,
Yeah.
Oh my God. I just love, I don't know, trying to encourage people to try the things.
That's great.
But everything you're saying is 100% accurate. Like, I originally had the idea for this show like 3 years before I ever did it. And like, I literally came up with the name, I made the logo and the artwork, and I came up with all the branding, and I was like, yeah, one day I'm going to do that, but I don't know how to do it right now. But I allowed myself the comfort of like, I do want to do that, but I'll know when the time is right.
Right.
And of course, at that time, I was doing a different podcast, so I'm sure my kind of creative juices were being fulfilled,
Yeah.
you know, and were being used in a different way. So I wasn't thinking about it as much, but it still stuck with me. And then when I could identify, I'm ready to do that, then it was like, okay, now I've also acquired new skills
Right.
that help me. Because if I would have started it then, I wouldn't have really known how to use an audio setup. I had to learn that from the friend that I was doing the other show with. Like,
Right.
I learned more about what cameras I could and could not use. You know, stuff
Yes.
like that. Again, for my bar of like, oh, I would like this show to eventually have video. But to be fair, even the done is better than perfect idea, this show started with no video. And I was like, you know what? I just want to do it I want to start having these conversations.
Right.
That's the important part.
Right.
And then after a while, it evolved to be like, oh, here's where I can find and borrow the cameras that I need to get. Here's, you know, even finding a location. Like, because when I first did this show, I would go to the guests.
Oh, wow.
You know, so if you were a part of like were a part of the first, like, I don't know, 12 episodes or something, I would have been going to you. I would have been like, hey, Matt, where do you want to meet up at? What's your apartment like? You know, and I would have brought the stuff over and then we would have been talking there. Like, but it was more so like, even though there was a part of me that was like, this is not how I want this show to be.
Yeah.
I was like, well, I would still rather it exist.
Right.
And then I
Right.
know it's going to evolve. And then I think like 20 episodes in is when I got video and all that sort of stuff. And then gradually, you know, got to rent a studio and all that sort of stuff. So it was like, okay, these things layer and it evolves just like everything, right?
Yeah. At some point you do have to start. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that is always the biggest thing, just like the improv show.
Yeah.
I thought about it months ago and kept thinking about it. And then eventually I was like, you know what? Here's how I can make this happen.
Right.
And here's how I'm going to make this happen. And here's the plan that I'm going to invoke to actually achieve that thing.
Yeah.
And again, that is not me saying that it's easy in general or that it should be easy
Right.
for anybody or whatever. Like, there's a ton of stuff. Again, I sat and argued with myself about going to the gym for years
Yep.
before I actually went,
Yep.
you know, and then even once I went for a week and then didn't go for 2 weeks and then had to restart the whole process over, basically. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
yep.
everything, it does take baby steps.
Yeah.
But I always try to encourage people that, like, the most important part is the baby steps.
Yep.
You know, and it is that it's every cliche quote you can think about of like the first step of the 1,000-mile journey, whatever it is, like that's the most important. But it is. It's like just getting the thing started.
Right.
Because like I also have this thing, and I say this so much in this podcast, but like I also think there's so much power in just letting ourselves try things. Because I think then and only then will we know if we actually want it.
Right.
Because then if you don't, it just sits as a what if. And it just circles in your mind of like, what if I did that? What if I did that? And maybe you're beating yourself up over something you don't even actually want to do, right?
Right.
Because yes, one portion of the answer is like, well, if you're not doing it, you don't want it that bad.
Right.
But then you could also do it and you could easily find out, wait, that's not how I thought that was going to be. Then there's a new layer of how bad do you want it? Because
Right.
you're either going to form a plan B, C, or D because you're like, no, this needs to work. Or you tried the thing and you're like, wait a second, that sucked. Nope, I don't want it that bad after all.
Right.
Then you can check it off your
Answered.
list.
Yep.
It's answered. You can take it out of your mind. It's no longer a what if.
Right.
So like, again, like that's why I get so excited about people just like trying things. So I'm just like, there's so much power in trying the thing. Because
Yep.
then you're going to know if you really want it or not.
Right.
Because I do that with myself all the time. There's a lot of like business ideas that I'll like sit and randomly have. And I'm like, oh man, that'd be so cool to do a coffee shop like this. Oh my gosh, it'd be named this. Most of the time, all I need to do is hop over into Photoshop, design a branding set for it, and then I'm good. Like, because I just needed to get it out of my system.
Right.
You know what I mean? I know not everybody can just go over to Photoshop and design something. That's not what I'm saying is the only way. But like, whatever that is.
Right.
And because I think in the same way of like even like emotional stuff that we need to get, how valuable is just talking about it to somebody, right?
Incredibly valuable. Yeah.
And I think it that kind of feeds in the same way. It's whether for better or for worse, we're expelling something
Yep.
from our body.
Yep.
And I think that is an important thing to do. And I know I'm making all of this sound way more magical than maybe what it is. But I think that is kind of just stripping it down. That is really what it is. Whether it's talking about like anything,
Yeah.
you know, like whether you're mad, upset, sad, worried, whatever, like talk that out, or even maybe writing it in a journal, whatever it is, getting it out of your head
Right.
helps even in the smallest way. And I think that
does.
creative ideas or potential bucket list item, whatever it is, like
Right.
trying those things, doing those things, like just giving it a shot and understanding, like embracing that idea of failure.
Right.
Right. And you can either learn from it or be like, oh, I failed. I don't want it anyway. It's
Right.
good. I'm cool. I'm
Yeah.
cool. But like just getting the stuff out of our heads and out of our systems, I think is a really important thing that when you say it out loud, it's like, duh, but it's not always, you can't think of that.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like I don't think, I know for a long time, I couldn't sit and, 7 years ago have told you all of that. And like, yeah, I'd just be like, I want to do a bunch of stuff. It's like, and so it's not always that easy,
No.
to
Yeah.
do any of those things, to talk about your problems or to
Yeah.
open up to somebody about
Yeah.
something or to whatever. Like,
Leaving yourself the space to be like vulnerable and like I don't know, like the idea of putting yourself out there, I feel is like, even on a podcast or like video or something like that, like there's an aspect of vulnerability to that, because that like, people are going to be looking, like people I don't know are watching me and like forming thoughts about me. And like, you have to be okay to be vulnerable like that.
yeah.
And I think that that's part of it as well, is like accepting that and allowing yourself that space.
Right. 100%.
Yeah.
Well, this is not me backing you into a corner, but I'm telling you, I would love to hear some of the ideas you have. Obviously, off the podcast. I'm not going to be like, tell me everything you want to try, and we've got it
Strictly
on record
confidential.
right now. I'll bleep it all out. But no, for real,
Yeah.
I would love to. I know we're just meeting for the first time, and I'm
No,
like,
that's
tell me all your
perfect. Yeah.
secrets. But tell me all your secrets.
Yeah.
So last couple things here before we wrap up.
Yeah.
Before I end up going on 6 more TED Talks. So one of the things that I've wanted to start doing with this show is toss a couple formal questions at the end. There's
Okay.
one formal question that has been here since the very beginning, but I'm adding a few more. One of them is, I've wanted to start tossing the floor to the guest and say that, is there like one question that you would have for me before we wrap things up? Is there anything that comes to mind? If there isn't, that's fine. But is there something that you'd want to ask me?
Well, I feel like you gave me a lot of advice, actually, that I'm going to take to heart about the
That's
creative
awesome.
side of things.
I love that.
But I guess, like, as you've talked to different people, like, I guess maybe in more of your recent episodes, like, what has been something that you've walked away from, like, that has sort of changed the way that you see the world, like, as you talk to different people in this podcast?
For me, I really think it's, I joke about the cheat code thing, right? Of like, oh, I become friends with people through an episode of a podcast. And it's silly to say it that way. But like, I think that also comes from realizing that it's the cliche, like we are all far more similar than we are different. And taking the time to sit down and just, like, again, before today, you and I did not know each other.
No.
We had only DM'd on Instagram. And now I'm like, oh man, Matt and I have been friends for years, right? You know what I mean? It's like, because yes, obviously we've talked about all the things,
Right.
but that's kind of the design of the show. It's like, yes, we're making a podcast out of it, but we're getting to know each other.
Right.
And for me, it's like learning that aspect that like, okay, there's commonalities between everyone and everything.
Right.
And there's so much power in learning what someone else has been through to either do something cool or go through something shitty or whatever it is.
Yeah.
There's always something to be learned out of that process. So I think for me, it's like I always walk away with being like, oh, I just got to make a new friendship with somebody.
Yeah.
Not necessarily like, oh, and we made a cool podcast. Like, that's an awesome bonus, right? It's the core of why we're doing this. But it's more so from the idea that, like, okay, I just got to relate to somebody
Right.
on a lot of levels that I knew nothing about before we sat down for 2 hours to make a show.
Right.
So, like, I think that answers the question.
Yeah.
It's, you know what I mean? I think that that's what I carry away. It's like, okay,
That's good.
we've got a lot of similarities. Everyone has a lot of similarities.
Right.
And that's like the authentic value, I think, in hearing somebody's story. Like, I wish it was more, I don't know if normal is the right word, because maybe it is, and I'm just making it something that it's not. But like, I don't know, I wish everybody did the cliche, like, deep talks all the time.
Right.
And I think people do more often than not, but like, I don't know. Like, I like getting coffee with somebody and be like, hey, let's just catch up, and we talk for 6 hours.
Right.
I like that. I love that.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm going to design my whole day around this conversation because I know there's a chance that we're just going to take a deep dive into talking about everything. and I want the space to do that.
Yeah.
Like there's so many times I'll be getting coffee with somebody, and we'll be 2 hours in, and they're like, "Oh man, I'm so sorry. I bet you got to go. Like let's wrap it up." And I'm like, "No, I actually scheduled my day to where this. I literally scheduled like a 6-hour block of like this potentially taking up that time because I know, as you've learned, I have a tendency to talk a lot, more than enough for both of us. But I also want to give myself the space to do that because I also know I'm going to walk away from that conversation having connected with that person better.
Yeah.
And that's always my favorite thing to look for.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's what I tend to take away from these conversations.
That's good.
I hope that ramble was a good answer.
It was.
Okay.
I mean, you're the one editing this. So.
Even if it wasn't, you'll never have heard it. You'll have no idea what I just said. Is there anything big that we haven't talked about? Is there anything you're like, oh, dude, this part of my life was insane. We haven't even talked about it.
No, I mean, like, I think we kind of covered the basics. I mean, it's one of those things that I think, especially within my, like, sort of professional group, like, the gay thing is, like, I am really trying to push that because I think as what I've learned being in the professional world, we'll say for, like, 5 or 6 years now, it's visibility matters. And so, like, I want to be an example of like, hey, you can be a scientist, you can be openly gay, you can be, nerdy in public. I want to be a little bit of an example for people because I wish that I would have had that more. And so like that's sort of what I've been pushing a lot.
Yeah.
To like, and wanting to like, do it for myself, yes, so that I'm happier, but also helping to represent and like, be an example for someone who maybe is not comfortable being so open.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
So here's a question I have for you. One of the last couple ones. If you could go back at any point in time in your life and talk to young Matt, where would you go and what would you tell him?
I'd probably go back to around the time, probably around like 6th grade or so. So this is when I was transitioning to the new school, which ended up being the best thing for me. But I was resisting it a little bit. I don't know, maybe it was like Stockholm syndrome or something with like these people that were ruining my life. But I would tell myself to just embrace it because like you're going to meet the best people that you've ever met. I'm still friends with all these people. And like, just not to worry, I see people that came out in high school and things like that, and I'm like kind of jealous of it. And it's like, man, I wish that like I would have had the confidence or the circumstances for me would have been right that I could have done that. And, I think everyone, of course, lives their own story and their own truth in different ways. And so I would tell myself like, hey, maybe don't worry so much. But at the same time, like, I still think that, I came out when it was right for me. So yeah, I would say like, take a chill pill, relax, enjoy the ride.
I have one final question for you.
Okay.
So I end every one of these episodes with the exact same question.
All right.
And that is, if right now you knew that on the other end of that microphone, everyone in the world was listening to you talk, so you've got a live mic connected to everybody and you get to share something with them. Everyone can hear you. What is it that you would tell them? What is it that you would want them to hear?
Watch Tasting Columbus.
Yes, there it is. Boom, graphic pops up on the...
Right. No, I don't know. I'd say like, probably like, and this is something, again, like I mentioned this a little bit earlier, like just allow yourself to be vulnerable and learn from it. And I always I love this line from the Magic School Bus. Miss Frizzle says like, take chances, make mistakes, and get messy. There we go. I think that is like a good mantra for life of like, and something that I'm trying to embrace better, like take chances, make mistakes, get messy. Like that's the only way you learn, and allowing yourself the space to do that is the best way, I think, for you to kind of be happy with yourself. And so take chances, make mistakes, get messy. That's what I would say to everyone.
I love it. Matt, dude, thank you so much, man.
Yeah.
This was a blast.
Thank you.
Was this enjoyable to do?
It was.
It was. You're
Yeah.
not like, I can't believe I just wasted my day.
No,
doing
I mean,
this. Beautiful.
I like talking to people too, so
Perfect.
I'm all about it.
Here's the real test.
All right.
Did we become friends in the process of this? Did it happen? The handshake has sealed it. My freezing cold hands that you're now feeling, they are freezing cold on this end of the table. It's very cold in here. Dude, thank you so much, man. Friendship mission accomplished in another episode of this show. Look at that. Making friends left and right with my my cheat code of a podcast. No, of course, unless Matt lied there at the end, just because I put him on the spot. But you know what? I guess I still appreciate the effort, even if he did. That is friendship enough for me. But for real though, big thank you to Matt for being down to meet me for the very first time and record it for a podcast. So for real, support cool local things like the web series that he hosts, Tasting Columbus. You heard us talk about it in the episode. You know what it is. I think it's dope. So follow 614 Magazine if you want to check that out. And of course, if you want to know more of what Matt is up to in general, you can find him around the internet at teeinthegarden. That's T-E-E, like his name. And honestly, what an incredible handle. You can also follow me at Who's Ross Tyson. More importantly, though, you can find and follow the show at WYDH Pod. That's on Instagram, and there's a Twitter if you want that. I truly barely use it, but it's there. But of course, if you really want to help out and support the show, there's a few other ways that you could do that. You could hit that MFN subscribe or follow button on whatever platform you're listening to this on. It would also be very cool if you toss up a rating or review wherever you can for the show as well. Toss some stars on there. Leave a written review if you really dig the show. If you want to keep up with all these stories in video form, both these full-length stories and the shorter topic-based 15-minute Fridays, you can subscribe to my personal YouTube channel, youtube.com/Ross Tyson. That's where you can find every single one of these in video form. So do all the things, feed the algorithm, tell somebody about it, whatever you can do, help spread the word of this show and get these stories heard in whatever form. It helps a whole lot more than what you may know. So support if you can, support if you want, but even if you don't, as always, thank you so very much for listening. If you're on YouTube, thanks for looking, and I hope you stick around for more because you know how it goes. I'll be back next episode with a brand new guest that you may or may not know of, but with a story that I guarantee you for sure never heard.